Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. Huge shout out and special thanks to the channel members. The manhwa starts by explaining that the undead are those who can't die even after dying. They are immortals who have escaped the cycle of life and death. Dominating a single dimension was not difficult. Obtaining the dimension called Earth was only a matter of time, or so they thought. We see one of the Skelly brothers asking how this could be, pointing at somebody in a fire, asking how a mere human is still alive. We hear the man say, "Who knows?" as he continues walking forward while on fire, saying it's probably because he's sturdier than they are. As his skin starts to peel off, he instantly goes in for a punch on one of the Skelly brothers, shattering him. It jumps back to 2 years ago, as we hear a woman saying she can't do this anymore. She let him live here because he said he was job hunting, but all he does is spend every waking hour drinking and playing games. If he's going to be like this, he should just go back to their mom and dads. The man says no, that he can't rely on their parents at this age. We learn that it's his younger sister, and she asks how relying on her is okay. She tells him that he has an allowance, and that tomorrow is the new year, so he should get a part-time job or something. The man says okay, and that they should leave this till tomorrow as his head is still spinning. He closes the door as she keeps screaming, and he lets out a sigh, then plops onto the bed. We learn that his name is Kang Yun. He calls himself pathetic, asking why he's living like this. The only thing he's done after coming to Seoul was getting a short internship at a major corporation, and he should find some kind of labor job soon. He looks up at his desk, realizing he forgot to turn off his monitor before he left. The man says that life would be much better if it were a video game. Then he could probably find a pretty good job, like a warrior, wizard, or swordsman. Then he passes out. Some status windows begin to appear, saying they detected a general connection from the dimension, but connection is temporarily denied. The tutorial will now begin on Earth. Yun jolts awake after feeling something, looking around to see he's in a white room, wondering what's going on. He sees a status window in front of him that says the time until complete connection with the Haken dimension will be 4 years and 364 days. Pretty much 5 years. They welcome him to the tutorial, saying it has a total of 8 stages. He starts reading, and it says that death in this place is not connected to reality, and he is unable to give up halfway. If he fails, he cannot try again. When the tutorial is cleared, an awakening and a reward will be given. He's surprised and begins to sweat nervously as his heart starts racing. He says this is a dream only severe gaming addicts end up having. He starts apologizing to his parents and his sister, who we learn is named Hyun. He says that he'll find a job, but for now he doesn't care since this is a dream, and maybe this is a sign from God to go all out one last time. The one more game mindset has been activated. The first stage is about to begin, and the status window says they pray that his courage can save Earth. This catches Yun off guard, and he wonders what this means, staring at it blankly. The first stage is that he must prove his courage and defeat what he fears the most. He has to reach a specific destination at the end of the bridge, and if he fails, it will be death. He wonders what bridge they are talking about, and suddenly he's transported. He sees lava below him as they have to walk across makeshift bridges to get across. Yun wonders why the heat feels so real, and who all these other people are, and what's going on. The other people say they were definitely in their homes. He asks what kind of stupid dream this is, then hears his sister and looks over, seeing her standing there with tears in her eyes. He asks why the hell she's in his dream, saying this is ridiculous, and she tells him that's her line. She wonders if this is truly her dream in the first place, saying that it's talking about saving the Earth or whatever. He calls out to her, telling her not to act like this is hers, because it is his. She barks at him, asking if that's important, and asks how it would be this hot inside of a dream, and if it's even possible to have natural conversations in a dream. He laughs, saying his brain is easily tricked. People always say they can't feel pain in their dreams, but that's a lie. He's had experiences where it felt like he was pissing for real, only to wake up relieved that his blanket was safe. She sarcastically says, "Good job saying something embarrassing in front of your sister." He tells her that he's going first, and she asks where. He reminds her that the status window said to reach the bridge at the end, asking if she didn't see it, but says since it's his dream, an NPC like her wouldn't know. She gets angry, saying she saw it as well, and asks if he's not worried about falling. He asks if she's stupid, saying that this is a dream, he'll wake up if he dies. As he says this, he sees a man falling down past him. He watches as the man falls straight into the lava, and the man begins to scream as he burns alive. The smell of his burning flesh fills their noses, and they both look down at him, sweating nervously. Hyun asks him what he was saying a second ago. He starts to shake, saying the screams just sound a little realistic and he's not scared at all, and she calls him pitiful. She sighs, telling him not to do anything stupid, and if he's going to move, don't walk, it's probably safer to crawl. He says that he's not scared at all, but now that she's mentioned it, it makes sense. She sighs, saying he's keeping it up until the end. Other people start to move forward as we see him and his sister crawling along the bridge. She calls out to him, asking what he thinks happened to them, and if he has any ideas. He tells her it's just a very realistic nightmare, and she asks why he's still caught up on that, saying he's probably already realized this is not a dream. There's no way it would be this realistic, and something is definitely happening that they can't even begin to imagine. She says that if they die here, maybe even in real life they'll die as well. He begins to laugh, saying he was trying his best to ignore it, so why did she bring it up? Now he's frozen in fear. She calls him the most unreliable older brother in the world. He lays down, telling her he wants to rest a little before continuing, and he can't crawl anymore because his hands and legs are shaking. She asks if he's just going to lay there, and he reminds her there's still a possibility this is all a dream. He says maybe if he stays still like this, he'll wake up on his own. A status window appears in front of both of them, saying that due to a certain amount of time passing since the start of the tutorial, the difficulty is now increasing. They wonder what's happening as the entire area begins to shake, and the bridge begins to slowly collapse behind them. People start running, some falling off, and they realize now is not the time to stay still. Yoon tells Hyun to wait for him as he starts hauling absolute cheeks. He sweats heavily, saying it's okay, as the bridge isn't too narrow, and if he doesn't trip he'll reach the end. He just needs to look ahead and follow his path. They continue running, and he grows more desperate. He finally sees the end, saying that with this, it'll all be over. Then he looks to his left, spotting the bridge above his sister starting to collapse. He yells at her. She looks up, surprised, and he realizes he needs to act fast, so he leaps across, landing on her bridge as the rocks begin to fall down. He grabs her and dashes forward, causing them both to barely make it before her bridge collapses into the lava, dissolving into nothing. The status window appears once more, saying that he's leveled up, and congratulations on clearing stage 1. He has temporarily awakened as his clear reward, and he will officially awaken when the tutorial is over. He lays down, gassed out, saying he can't even move his body anymore. Hyun thinks about the wording, saying maybe there's more, and he asks her if she's not going to thank him. She does, and her status window opens, showing her stats. She wonders what level, strength, and agility mean. Yoon says this is the number one thing a man wants to receive on his birthday. He struggles to sit up, saying he needs to look at his stats as well. We see that his innate ability is called resurrection, but he has no actual abilities or skills. He struggles to stay sitting up, then suddenly jumps awake, screaming in his bed, gasping for air. He sweats nervously, saying surely that was a dream, right? We see someone sending a text saying they had a weird dream, and it turns out so did a lot of other people. They fell and died, but woke up. Someone makes a Reddit post, another person makes a Facebook post, and it's discussed all over the news. We see a familiar man posing for a hashtag Save the World challenge, and the time limit is shown once more, about the Haken dimension. Both Yoon and his sister start yelling each other's names as they open their doors and run outside. They begin talking about the dream, asking if they really had the same one. They keep cutting each other off until Hyun yells at him to shut the hell up. He tells her to stop cutting him off, and then they both sit there in awkward silence. Suddenly, their stomachs rumble, and they decide to put this aside for now, as the best thing to do is eat. As they eat, they stare at their phones, seeing that all of the trending topics are about the dream. Hyun says it really wasn't just a dream, and it wasn't just Korea, looks like the entire world had the same dream. Yoon wonders if this is really happening, but notes that dying in the dream didn't seem to affect reality. It says that 3 or 4 people out of every 10 fell, but none of them died. Hyun shakes, saying it was still too vivid, and she bets falling from that height would have hurt a lot, and that some of them are suffering from PTSD. He continues eating, and she asks him if it's really okay for them to be eating so peacefully, even though everyone outside is going wild. He keeps eating while thinking about it, then puts his utensils down, telling her there's nothing they can do about it right now, so they should just eat. He heads over to the window, moving the curtain, asking her if she really plans to get mixed up in all of this. They see looters going crazy, along with doomsdayers holding signs that say the time of judgment has come. Everyone has pretty much lost their minds. Watching all this from their balcony, Hyun says she probably shouldn't go to work today. He asks if she's seriously considering that, saying if they go out, they're only going to get hurt. She should remember the connection to the Haken dimension. She says when the status window popped up, she didn't get a good chance to look at it, but mentioned you could check how much time they have left. She opens it, deciding to check the time, and Yun says he missed the status window too. I wonder why he can't just open it. They don't know what it's about, but they do understand that there's about 5 years left. They wonder if they can really prepare in 5 years if the world is like this. Even if it's a mess right now, things will surely calm down, and it's best to stay safe at home. Hyun is surprised that he's making sense, even though she thinks he's usually dumb. Aside from the confusion that morning, nothing else of note occurred. By evening, most people had returned to their usual routines, and South Korea had quieted down again in a single day. And so the first day ended. We see Yun closing his eyes as he opens the status window, which welcomes him to the tutorial. It asks if he needs a basic explanation on how to use the interface, but he says no, he just wants to see his status window. He looks at it, wondering if his stats are good since he doesn't have a baseline to compare them with. He notices the magic power stat, implying they'll be using magic, and he's not sure if that's a good thing. But then he starts focusing on his innate ability called resurrection, and says this sounds like a cheat skill. The ability allows him to resurrect 24 hours after death. If he doesn't designate a location, he will resurrect at the last place he slept. The penalty for resurrection is that his level decreases by 1, and his ability stats will temporarily decrease by 50% for a day. These do not apply during the tutorial. Yun starts getting excited, saying there's no way he would have ended up as a useless extra. The tutorial asks him if he would like to enter stage 2. He says of course, whether his stats are high or low, he can fix them after leveling up. Since he's, in his own words, the amazing resurrection man, he can do anything. Up until now, he felt blissful, not even imagining what was to come next. We see a bloodied mace as a goblin screeches, and Yun is also screaming, fighting it off. He swings at the goblin, knocking its weapon away. Stage 2 is about defeating every enemy and improving his strength. He raises the mace above his head, saying the system is basically the same as games he's played, so he knew there would be something to do with fighting. He smacks the goblin's skull in and starts panting, gassed out. Yun says that even though he managed to kill it with his mace by ambushing it, his whole body has gone numb from the sensation of hitting it. He truly feels guilty for killing it, making him feel like he has to puke. He only beat it because it was a goblin. If he hadn't ambushed it, it could have been him instead. Just then, he sees something around the corner and instantly gets scared, gripping his weapon tightly. He spots another goblin behind him, called a goblin soldier, and it starts growling menacingly with a purple aura on its blade. Yun didn't know there were two from the start and says goblins are supposed to be low-level mobs for beginners, but this goblin is way bigger than the last one. The sword it's carrying is over 1 meter long. If he gets hit with that, he's 100% dead. The goblin starts to screech out of pure anger, and swings at Yun, hitting his mace, knocking it backwards. Because he's never worked out, and he stayed home all day, along with the fact his mace is so short compared to the goblin's blade, it easily overpowers him, slicing him multiple times. It jumps to him with tears rolling down his face, and he wonders what's happening, and why he has to go through something like this, as we see the goblin is dragging him away, leaving a snail trail of blood. He wonders why he's not dying, and when this dream will end, and he just really hopes that somebody can save him from this. Yun says that he always found it hard to understand how much blood a person has. Only by watching his own trail of blood did he feel the steadily approaching fear of death coldly tightening around his neck. While he suffered hella in the few hours before his life ended, he was subjected to savage torture by 4 goblins. We hear him screaming as Hyun wakes up from it and bursts into his room, asking why he's messing around so early in the morning. Then she looks over, spotting him completely fear-ridden in bed, biting his thumb while shaking. Later, he tells his sister what happened, and she asks if he's saying he died from extreme blood loss. He says yes, and that they pulled his fingers and toenails out one by one, stomping on them. He goes to continue, but she tells him to stop, saying even though she died too, it wasn't as bad as that. She then asks him why he was screaming. He tells her that if she experiences it herself, she'll see what he's going though, and he's pretty sure even Guan Yu would cry about this. She says she gets it and asks if he needs to go to the hospital. He asks why, and she says that it seems psychiatric visits have jumped up a lot over the past 2 days, and it looks like there are a whole lot of people who have gone through something similar. He thinks about it, saying he doesn't think it's that bad, and he doesn't have the money to go anyway. She then tells him there's some good news. It looks like if you die, the tutorial ends. The people who died in stage 1 didn't end up dreaming of stage 2. He sighs out of relief, saying he's glad to hear that, which means he can sleep peacefully tonight. Of course, he goes to sleep and wakes up to the entry into the tutorial, making a shocked face. Due to his resurrection skill, he's back in there. He grits his teeth and starts screaming, saying this is bullshit and wondering why it's happening to him. Since he's in the tutorial, there's no penalty for resurrection. Sitting in a cave, he sighs, saying that he just stared ahead blankly, took a nap, then stared some more. He assumed that if he just put up with it for a few hours, he would wake up, but there was no sign of that happening. He starts to get up, saying he's getting quite hungry. He heads toward the door, remembering that last time he picked the mace because he thought it would be powerful or easy to use, but this time, since he's scared of getting close to anything, he wants to go with a bow or a crossbow. Compared to shorter range weapons like a sword, a spear does seem better. So, he picks out a crossbow and a spear, saying, it's time to show them the shooting power of the Korean Reserve Army. Back shots would sound like World War II. We see him aiming down the sight as he fires a shot, pulling a Trump shooter. Yun is surprised as the angry goblin soldier turns back, glaring at him while drooling from the mouth. He realizes it was too hopeful of him to try and use a weapon he's never used before. They start charging at him, and he screams as he rushes forward with his spear. He avoids the goblin soldier and goes for the smaller one, instantly piercing its chest, saying he's got it, and with this, at least one is dead. He turns to face the other, but quickly realizes he can't pull the spear out from the smaller goblin. He looks to his right as the goblin soldier leaps at him with its sword overhead, killing him. He wakes up screaming once more, gassed out, saying at least this time he died immediately. A death without torture feels nice. The next day, we see the tutorial screen again, and he flips it off, saying he doesn't want to do this. For round 3, he goes with a sword and shield. Maybe you're wondering why he's using a new weapon. We learn that he spent the entire day studying how to use the sword. So, he stands in front of the goblins, as he's confident this time due to all the videos he watched, only to wake up again as they rock his shit. He starts laughing maniacally, saying they're definitely asking for it, and he mutters to himself that he's going to kill them, while Hyun watches from the doorway, concerned. The next night, the window appears again, marking round 4. To start off, he just blindly swings his sword. Why, you ask? This is the game-breaking formula for the status window. We see that through his efforts, he has surpassed his limits, and his vitality has increased by 1. He sighs and falls to the floor, asking if it really took 8 hours to raise his stat by just 1. He notices that the additional skills are set to 1, and he recalls that he got that point when he passed stage 1. He wonders why he forgot, then inhales some copium, blaming it on being so out of it that he forgot, and not on him being dumb. He decides to invest a point in his strength, and now, having raised his ability points by 2, it's time for some revenge on the goblins. That's what he expected, at least. But due to all the training, he was so tired that he couldn't even kill the little one and died instantly. In round 5, he raised his vitality by 1 once more, swinging the sword around. In round 6, he spent 10 hours training to get his strength up, and now he can easily take out the 2 goblins at the front. But due to his fundamental lack of physical abilities and combat skills, it still wasn't enough to face off against the rest. We're now in round 7, where he just swings his sword again and again, hoping for something, as we see him gain 1 vitality point, completely drenched in sweat. He falls to the floor, dropping the sword as he pants heavily. He looks up at the status window, and it says that his swordsmanship ability has increased to the lowest rank possible, which is F. He looks at it, wondering if his eyes are deceiving him. But he reads the entire thing, then clenches his fist, and starts screaming, saying he actually did it. He grabs his blade again, hyping himself up, saying that today he will actually kill all of the goblins. There were 5 goblins total in the second stage of the tutorial. 2 were in the front of the castle, and 3 were in the forest at the end. The first 2 were really easy. He could take them out by ambushing the first with a crossbow, and finishing the second with his sword. The issue was the 3 goblins in the forest. He can handle 2 of them in the same way as before, but the last goblin was a whole different story. Sparks fly as his sword hits its axe, and they start trading blow for blow in the middle of the woods. The goblin rears his hand back, swinging onto Yun's shield. He says that he can see the attack's path, and he starts to parry each and every one of the attacks, saying that it feels like his body is reacting before he can even think. as he readies his blade, thrusting it towards the goblin's throat, saying that this is the effect of the lowest rank sword mastery. He hits the goblin, only barely scraping its cheek, as the problem is he's already exhausted his vitality fighting the other four. The goblin dual grips his axe, as sparks fly again, knocking Yun's sword far away, as the difference in vitality is too great. The goblin goes for a home run swing, and Yun notices it but smirks as he hits a matrix dodge. The goblin is surprised by the dodge, and Yun explains the fact that it really enjoys torturing people, and because of that, instead of killing you immediately, it will knock you down and save its strength for the final blow. He starts to pivot on his foot, saying that its pattern is too obvious, while he kicks some dirt up into its face, blinding it, causing it to flail wildly. Yun grabs onto a rock, getting in close to its leg, and starts smashing its knee. The goblin screams in pain, and continues to flail wildly. Yun quickly runs to his back, and yells, and the goblin realizes where he is, as Yun screams that he is stronger. The goblin sees the rock getting closer to his face, as it smacks him right in the head, causing it to fall over onto the ground. Yun says that he thinks he just figured it out, the goblin's level that is. We see him panting, saying that it was so boring that he wanted to die. A status window appears, saying that he has cleared stage 2, and he has received 5 additional stats as the clear reward, and he can choose a weapon to take with him. He starts pogging out of his gourd, and we see that he also has unlocked the lowest ranked shield mastery, and crossbow mastery, and he yells saying that he's actually won. 2 more level ups come out, and he says this is the kind of power the Lord of Creation has, calling the goblin a subhuman piece of shit. He starts laughing, as the night continues, and it snaps back to reality, as he is turned into a pixel art monkey, saying it is a strong good morning. He's working in the kitchen while singing, saying to celebrate clearing stage 2, he has decided to make breakfast. He says that he's done. We see him tasting something, and he says even though he made it, it tastes perfect. Then he hears a loud rumble which startles him, and a Hyun runs out of a room asking what the hell that sound was. A status window saying that the world tutorial has ended, and you can now freely use the system outside of the tutorial, as they both see windows in front of them. They run outside as another one says dungeons are now activated, and they look down in horror as what they see is a gate in the middle of the street with 2 giant handles, and a purple aura, and they wonder if maybe that is the entrance to the dungeon. It starts to take us all over the world as we learn only awakened may enter the dungeons, and if the dungeon is not cleared within a set amount of time, the gate will, but it doesn't finish what it's saying, but we can all assume based on every other manhwa that has gates that it will break and monsters will pour out of it. We still see they have almost 5 years until the connection is completed. Yun explains that as soon as the dungeons activated, the world fell into greater chaos than the first day. They decided to not go outside and searched for information. Yun says that it seems like the tutorial isn't completely over, and it says that people who recently celebrated their birthdays can now participate, and it looks like you have to be at least 16. Hyun explains that there are whole lots of fuss about dungeons in the comments. Those who have passed the tutorial and the so-called talents are being urged to hurry up and clear the dungeons. Yun sighs saying it's not their business. Then he moves his mouse to something interesting, since they can now see the status windows in real life, and he says that this is the most important thing. He goes full nerd and yells status window. Hyun stares at him cringing internally. The window opens, telling him that as the tutorial is still technically ongoing, this cannot be used. He says since the tutorial 8 stages, and he repeated stage 2, 7 times, everyone else must have already finished. He sighs, saying in the end there's nothing he can do but clear everything, asking if there's information about stage 3. Hyun tells him that the theme is patience, and that's all she can find. Since only a few people have cleared stage 2, there's not much reliable information. He says that he guesses he'll have to just work through it. Even so, he says that he's gotten a lot stronger since the original attempts, so he surely will clear stage 3. That night in the tutorial, there is a golden liquid as a monster is singing, and we learn that he is actually getting R. Kelly'd by the monster, while holding back his anger. We get some backstory. Stage 3 is that he must prove his persistence and tenacity to endure any situation. The clear condition is to defeat the Gorka chief. If he waits, an opportunity will appear. He notices that he is equipped with a ghillie suit, saying these are the kind of clothes that make men excited. This mission must be about infiltration and assassination. He wonders what a Gorka is, as he has never heard of this monster before, saying that his first order of business is to find them. He decides to check out his rewards from stage 2. He opens his status window, seeing that he is now level 4 and all of his stats have gone up a good bit. He says this is how a status window ought to be, and the newly added shield and crossbow abilities are here as well. But the description still pisses him off, as they are the lowest rank mastery. He decides to allocate his additional skill points to what he needs right now, strength and vitality. He also puts some into agility as well. He starts to think about it, saying he thought there was one more thing, but he doesn't remember what it was. Then the window tells him that he can look in his inventory, and he says that's what it was. He opens it to see a sword. He taps onto it, drawing the blade out of the window, while laughing, saying that this is the coolest thing he has ever seen. Now that he has finished checking everything, he needs to go find the Gorkhas. He starts to explain to us about Carlos Hathcock, the legendary American Marine sniper. For 3 days he crawled 1.4 kilometers to assassinate a general, and he is the figure he respects the most starting today. As he has been crawling for about 10 hours. He says that he is almost there and there are 2 guards on watch duty, and he wonders if he will have to force his way through. His pants are also soaked in his own piss, as he tried to pull a Bear Grylls but missed, and the grass is hella itchy, as well as a lot of bugs in his clothes. He sees a shadow loom over him, and he is surprised as he looks up to see one of the Gorkhas staring down at him. He thinks that he was found out, but quickly realizes that's not the case, as he starts to get kellied, and he sits there saying that he has to bear it, as he needs to prove his persistence and tenacity. He starts muttering those words to himself, so he doesn't snap, but it doesn't happen, as his sanity goes full blown out the window. And he yells, saying that he's going to cut it off, while charging at the Gorkha, saying its dick is his, and he stabs it right through where no man should ever have an injury. I genuinely feel bad for the Gorkha. Can we get an F in the chat for our boy? Its corpse falls to the ground, and Yun laughs, saying that he ended up cutting something useless off. The other Gorkha stares at him, and then starts to mumble, and the mumble eventually turns into a scream that echoes throughout the camp. Gorkhas from all over begin running out with their torches surrounding Yun. He laughs, saying since he's already screwed, he might as well use the line that he's always wanted to say, and yells as loud as he can, saying he's going to rock their shit, and the skill-raging lion's roar has been created. Blood starts to fly out as we see a Gorkha's head in the air, and jumps to the second round as he instantly screams, "Bring it on!" Not even wearing the ghillie suit. We learn that lion's roar reduces the morale and stats of nearby enemies and removes any debuffs. He realizes something while crawling for 10 hours on round 1. We see him charging straight through the main gate of the camp, and he says that the Gorkha warriors left during the day to hunt, and they only returned when the sun went down. In short, the camp is weakest during the day, and everybody who is left is unable to fight, as we see him instantly take care of 3 Gorkhas. He heads for the chief's tent, and slides through the doorway, saying that he's here. He's surprised as he sees a couple of purple lights and the Gorkha chief sitting on his throne. It points at Yun, and the 2, I'm assuming shamans besides him, start to inflict their magic onto him. We see it completely freezing him up as he has now been immobilized by a low-rank magic skill. He wonders why the tutorial includes this, saying there's no way, but he recalls Lion's Roar removing all debuffs, so he takes a deep breath using Lion's Roar, and shouts, which low-key scares the Gorkha chief, but frees Yun. He charges forward leaping through the air with his sword, saying that everybody has a plan until they get hit by the sword, and he slices down, killing the chief. Now he has cleared stage 3, and he has received the intermediate rank body regeneration as the clear reward. And due to speedrunning it, he has now received the title, Impatient 1, as an additional reward. He receives a level up, and we learn that the title gives him an extra 1 to all of his stat points. He says he broke through stage 3 in just 1 day, considering it took him a week to get through stage 2, this is a huge improvement, and he has come to a single conclusion. He might possibly be insanely talented, and at this rate, he might even break through stage 4 in a few minutes, as he starts to paint himself as the protagonist to a story, with him standing atop a dragon. We get a month time skip, since he had that thought, and it has been 25 days since specially formed squads of Awakeners were sent to clear dungeons. 40% of all dungeons discovered have been successfully cleared. As civilian Awakeners continue to raid and steadily advance, the government will henceforth offer rewards. We hear Yun screaming, and Ahyun says he's back at it again, and surely he knows the neighbors will file a complaint if he keeps doing this. She asks if he got hit in the back of the head with an arrow today, and he comes out of the room saying that he cleared it, and he just went in and fucked everyone up. She tells him it's time to eat, and she expects him to throw another fit, and then she is completely surprised as she goes to congratulate him. And she asks if something happened in his dream, as we see him now towering above her, and she says his face is weird. She asked him why he looks so angry, and he says that the tutorial bastards are pissing him off. She tells him to lighten up a little, saying that he looks like a complete criminal these days, and he asks what she just said, saying she shouldn't be saying something like that to her brother. She asks what the concept of stage 4 was and reminds him that he's freeloading in her house. He says it was a group project, forcing them to prove leadership, and that the clear condition is to remove the dungeon core. It also gives them a tip, saying it's best to escape without leaving a single member behind. He says it was like roleplay, and the party members were NPCs who fit into the settings. They were arguing about whether they should keep going or retreat, and they didn't have enough rations to keep going and brute force the dungeon. A couple rejected it pretty strongly, but ultimately, they decided to clear the dungeon. She asks what's wrong then, and he says at first, he was obviously being pretty cool while carrying them. He raised their morale using Lion's Roar. Thanks to the recovery ability he got from clearing stage 3, he stood at the front lines. The skill uses magic power to recover and regenerate his body, regardless of the wound. She says surely everything is fine then, asking what was the problem that made him take a month to finish. He starts to let out an angry sigh, saying it started that night. As we see them standing behind him while he sleeps with a knife, he says those bastards didn't go on night watch like he told them to, and when he caught them trying to run away, they ambushed him and killed him. He knew from the start that they were going to do something like this. She tells him to swallow everything before he talks, calling him a dickhead. He then swallows his food, saying every attempt to get to the dungeon he made was a failure. Every attempt was composed of similar people in similar situations, and in that terrible scenario, he had to use his brilliant mind to find a way through. She asks him what it was. He puts his chopsticks down, laughing, saying that he just needed to beat up all the bastards who got in his way before he started clearing it. The final round of the 4th stage, one of the men says that they should go further, and it'd be a waste to go back without anything despite coming all the way here. Another one tells him they don't have enough food left, and asks him what they'll do if they don't find the core, saying the mana stones will still be profitable enough. As they keep going, Yun starts to get angry, telling them all to shut the hell up using his Lion's Roar. One of them covers her ears, asking him what he thinks he's doing, and Yun points his blade at her, saying that everyone is going to follow his words from now on, and if they refuse, they'll die, if they talk back, they'll die as well. Bullcut McGee asks him if he's insane, but instantly gets hit in the face. Yun grabs onto his shirt, so he can't fall over, and repeatedly beats the hell out of this guy, telling him not to talk back. As his face is all swollen and he's crying, his girlfriend is worried, and Yun looks at them all, saying that they just need to follow him, as he knows the way, and if they talk back again, he will kill them. We see his stats are actually much higher than they were previously as well. A skeleton leaps at him, but he grabs onto its blade, pulling it to his side, while rearing his fist back, slamming his hilt into its skull, cracking it. He says that's the last one, and they all watch in complete amazement as he actually killed every one of the mobs all by himself, as their corpses litter the room. He looks out at the dungeon core, saying maybe they just need to break its supports, and that's simple enough, as he swings his sword doing exactly that. A status window appears congratulating him for clearing stage 4, and he has received Cleave as the clear reward. He also received the Ring of Strength and Mind, which is rank B, and a level up. Just looking at the results, his gains from stage 4 weren't bad at all. He didn't need to say anything about his rapidly growing stats, and he could farm the item drops for monsters as well. Among them, he still doesn't know what the mana stones are used for, as we see he has the Skeleton Soldier's mana stone and the Skeleton Knight's mana stones. He says that there will definitely be use for them later on, and the cleave skill is just as it sounds, it cleaves. The Strength and Mind ring makes him immune to all mind-type magic and mental status conditions of rank A or below, and he says that his rewards were incredible. We see sweat hitting the floor as he says his biggest gain was that he got hella strong in real life too, as we see him doing one-arm push-ups, 300 of them to be exact. Bro got jacked on trenbolone sandwiches. He says that exercising his body without weights hasn't been cutting it anymore, and maybe he should go to the gym. His phone starts to ring, and he looks at it wondering if it's an ad or something, but he sees it's an alert message as a dungeon has opened up, and it tells all the citizens to stay inside. We hear screams as people are begging for safety. We see some goblins breaking into a window, as well as people being murdered on the streets while running away in fear from them. Yun looks outside, wondering if it's been that long since he already put in the request to clear the area. He says that at this rate, Hyun is going to be in danger. He runs around the apartment, looking for anything he can use as a weapon, wondering why he can't even find a sword. Then something catches his attention as he sees his kitchen knife in the sink. Outside, we hear him running at full speed while he screams, taking a deep breath and yelling, saying it's been a while, calling them bastards. The goblin's turn, and he clicks his tongue, saying it looks like he still can't use his skills, but, thanks to that, he has now got their attention. They start charging at him while speaking goblin, and he says he can't hear them properly because they are just stage 2 small fry. Even if he says that, there's no guarantee that these are the same level as those from the tutorial, but for some reason, he can tell how strong they are just from the way they move, and he stabs one straight through its head as we see the knife sticking out from the top of its skull. He thanks it for coming to him first, throws the corpse to the floor, and takes its sword, saying he's going to use it well. It jumps to an office building. We see that they have the doors barricaded as goblins are trying to get in, and they all sit there nervously. Hyun is a worker here, and she looks down at her phone, wondering what Yun is thinking. She hears the screams outside as something is fighting them. It gets closer to the door as their barricades start to fall over. We see a bloodied flip-flop step atop some file cabinets, and we hear Yun saying he accidentally broke it, and he tells Hyun that her brother is here. He really does look like a criminal. He walks in, waving at Hyun, telling her that he's here, and she starts to get embarrassed as everybody else in the office wonders who he is. She asks what's with his getup, as she sees him covered in blood. Then a man yells out to him in a very angry tone. Yun looks at him confused, and the man shouts, saying he doesn't know who he is, but how could he destroy their barricade like that? And at this rate, the monster's gonna get in. Hyun says that's her department chief, and Yun apologizes, saying he can't control his strength, but it's not like they'll have to worry about the monsters, as he tells them to look behind, as all they see are corpses. They are surprised that he defeated that many by himself. He points to their weapons on the floor, saying that they should all pick one up and hold on to them for a bit. He's not sure how many stages they have cleared, but as long as they don't panic, even normal people can take one goblin on. He starts to turn around, and Hyun yells, asking where he's going. He says, while coming here, he saw goblins everywhere, and he's pretty sure the upper floors are full as well. Even if it's only a few, he'd rather sleep well tonight. It jumps to later, as water is being poured onto his wounds, and he asks Hyun if it's really okay to waste water like that, as they don't know how long they'll be stuck here. She tells him to shut up, and they at least have to treat it, and this is a saline solution anyway. She sighs, saying he's acting tough, yet he's still running around getting hit a lot. He says he hasn't practiced dodging, and his regeneration skill is nuts, so he can usually take most attacks. But since he can't use his skills, he guesses it's not having an effect. She tells him to be careful, saying that if he can't use his skills, that means he can't resurrect too. And him saying that he'd step up and deal with the rest of the monsters in the building was just too much. He looks at her smugly, saying, still, it was kind of cool though, right? She sighs, saying it serves him right, getting beaten up, although everybody else seems to think a bit differently about him. One of her seniors was trying to get her to introduce him to her, asking if he's interested. He starts to blush, thinking about it, saying if she's okay with a guy who curses a lot, then sure. It jumps to later that night, as he opens his eyes to the status window, and he says that he forgot he had this, as he has been too focused on the actual day. As stage 5 is starting, he has to prove he has the wisdom to overcome any difficulty. He looks around as he hears people talking about a succubus, saying that in situations like this, those who talk the most are suspicious. One of the girls tries to de-escalate the situation, and he wonders what's going on, as he sees them all talking to one another. The clear condition is that he must defeat a succubus, which is a nightmare demon disguised as a human. He thinks about it, saying that usually in stories, it appears in men's dreams and sucks out their energy, and other stuff. They usually look like gorgeous women. The issue here is that all the women here are ridiculously gorgeous, and he wonders if it was set up that way on purpose. One of the girls asks him what he thinks, asking who he thinks the succubus is, and he says that she's even prettier up close, and something smells really good. He nervously looks away, saying he's not sure. Then he notices a window appear, as he looks down at the girl, and it says that the ring of strength and mind has resisted the seduction attempt. Of course, if you recall, while wearing the ring, you gain immunity to all mind-type magic. As nighttime comes around, we see him sitting at the campfire, and he says, in stage 1, it was a circus of hellfire. Stage 2 was a week-long desperate battle with goblins. In stage 3, he got pissed on after crawling for hours, and in stage 4, it was a month-long project. Those times, he was just rolling around like a dog, but now he finally has the opportunity for an easy win. He says he's sorry for cursing at God before, but now he sees that it truly is God's plan. Then he covers his smile, and he recalls that it clearly warned him that he would become a target if he determined her identity, saying even if he does know her identity, it's not over yet. He's not entirely sure, but surely she'll be strong, especially if she can transform into a human. Instead of acting rashly, he should first win over the other NPCs. Since the men might be under her spell, he'll have to approach the women first. He swears he has no other motive, but we know, bro is capping, and he decides to maybe sleep on it. He opens his eyes and sees an unfamiliar ceiling, confused, remembering that he is in a Hyun's company. Some of the co-workers say they're glad he woke up, and they were just about to wake him as the army arrived. We see him clenching his fist, saying that the succubus obviously realized who he was and killed him in his sleep. Then he asks them who they said came. As we see outside, there are a whole lot of army trucks. They start hopping out of their trucks and immediately start blasting their guns at the goblins. Hyun watches from above, surprised that the army actually came, and everybody else says that the monsters are no match for the guns, and he says it's all over now. A chill runs down his spine, and he realizes something, saying that he's pretty sure he felt something off, almost as if there's something dangerous. He notices something else, and we see the army men reloading, saying there's no end. They start shit-talking each other, just friendly army banter. They see one of the men shooting a red goblin as it walks forward, tanking the shots, lobbing his head off. They start instantly trying to put fire down to avenge their fallen comrade, and one of the men says it killed the entire platoon. They wonder what's the deal with the goblin as we see it get shot in the head, but it just walks it off as their bullets are having no effect on the beast as it starts screaming while charging directly at them. They wonder what the hell is going on, telling the driver to go all gas no brakes, and he starts speeding off. The goblin crouches down, leaping off the floor, catching up to the truck through the air. They look up to see its shadow, and then get cut down. They start screaming as the truck begins to get heavier, causing the driver to lose control and it slams into another truck. They wonder what's going on in the back, and Hyun watches, surprised, as their trucks have all come to a full stop, and the goblin has wiped out the entire group that was in the back of the truck. He looks at it worried, and the goblin slowly looks up at him while releasing a purple aura. Some of the other soldiers wonder what's going on. One of them says that Squad 3 is wiped out. The man asks where their signaler is, saying they need to submit a request for reinforcements. We learn that his name is Corporal Young Jae-hoon. He complains about his head hurting and wonders what happened as they got into a car accident. He looks up, seeing the red goblin licking its lips. Bro better run. He asks his signaler where the reinforcements are and is told that they're sending a civilian talented. That's their version of awakeners, I guess. He asks if they're really sending in just one and says this is driving him crazy. The goblin leaps off the top of the truck, and he raises his gun, telling it to die. As he starts to fire, his gun instantly jams up. The goblin gets closer and goes for a swing, but we hear Hyun screaming while yeeting a piece of concrete, hitting the goblin in the face, which actually damages it unlike the bullets, sending it flying across the road, knocking it down. Jae-hoon is surprised, wondering what that was, and Hyun hops up on the truck, asking them if they are okay. He starts to smile creepily, saying that being a soldier in this situation means there's a lot of people counting on him. Jae-hoon looks up to see his evil-ass face and starts to feel an overwhelming sense of panic and points his gun at him, screaming it's a monster. Hyun tells him to put his gun down, saying that he's a human. Jae-hoon says the word human twice, and Hyun asks if he just had a stroke. Jae-hoon says that if this is the reinforcement, he does seem pretty strong, and then bows, saying that he was caught off guard. Hyun says that he did nearly die, so he understands, and Jae-hoon thanks him for his help. Hyun says he doesn't mind it, and he's not here because of a sense of justice or anything. He notices the goblin getting back up. Since their eyes met, it definitely would have come to a Hyun's company after the army got defeated, and it'd be better for him to deal with it here than fight with bystanders around him, and he tells the soldiers not to fire their guns, because if he gets hit, they'll put holes in him as well, and asks if they have tear gas or anything. Jae-hoon says they do, and they brought most weapons that can be used, and he tells them to use it here. Jae-hoon tells him that he needs a gas mask, but Hyun yells, saying it's fine, he doesn't have time to explain, and he also tells Jae-hoon to warn the others not to shoot, as they'll all die if he doesn't kill it. Jae-hoon orders all the other platoon members to put their gas masks on and stay alert, and only shoot at monsters that approach them, and never turn their guns off the center of the road. Hyun starts approaching the goblin, saying the field is ready, and he's sorry, but he holds a pretty serious grudge against them. Bro is a racist. Jae-hoon pulls the pin on the tear gas, throwing it through the air, but the goblin notices it, and it begins to spread out, causing the goblin to scream and flail wildly. Hyun says hobgoblin or normal goblin, they all swing wildly when panicked. He charges in, saying since it's deflected bullets, pain like this must be new to it. We see tears rolling down his face, and he says that it looks like it's pretty tenacious, but he's probably more used to pain than it is. He swings, knocking its axe out of its hand, causing it to slide across the road, and he says now that the weapon is disarmed, he can start its beating. He hits the goblin with 6 rapid strikes, and his hand begins to tingle, and he wonders why the hell it's so tough. He continues beating the hell out of it, telling it to die. Jae-hoon watches, saying that it's crazy how strong a talent it is. Then he hears a man asking what's going on here, saying he doesn't remember a reinforcement other than himself being sent. Jae-hoon looks up at the man's eyes, and it jumps back to Yun's blade that is heavily damaged, and he's a little gassed out. He calls the goblin a bastard, saying he expected it, but he hasn't inflicted a single injury, and at this point he's just going to get exhausted, and he wonders if he has to use a joint lock or something. But the only thing he knows what to do is swing his sword. The man from the truck then says excuse me as he leaps in, slicing the goblin with his sword. The goblin screams, but we can't tell if it actually had an effect. Yun says he's fast, wondering who it is. The man turns back, saying he didn't feel like he cut anything. It was like swinging at a rock. He tells Yun that no matter how strong it is, it's only the boss mob of an F rank dungeon. Since its defenses are normally high, it must have a separate weakness. Yun says it looks like this guy knows a few things, if he knows what rank the dungeon is. He doesn't know who he is, but he understands that. They both charge in, and Yun asks if he has some other plan. They start Eiffel Towering it, and the man says that its stamina doesn't seem that great, and it must be getting exhausted. Yun says he can see that as well, and he wonders what the point of exhausting it would be, as they can't even do damage as his sword breaks upon hitting it. He looks around, saying that he needs a weapon, and spots the goblin's axe. He starts running towards it, and the man says he's fast, but his strikes are weak. And he should attack its weak point while he draws its attention. Yun grabs the axe, and even if he says that, the only weak point he can recognize is the eyes, but it knows that and is protecting them. And he wonders where else he can attack, saying that maybe its joints will be weaker. And he screams, saying he doesn't know, and stabs his axe toward it. The goblin makes a very shocked expression, and so does the masked man. As yet again, Yun has stabbed an ungodly place that should never be entered. As we see the sword directly in the goblin's butt cheeks, Yun starts to feel depressed and apologizes to the goblin. Yun starts to think about his actions, saying that a philosophical question flashed through his mind: is the anus a vital point? He doubts it's a weakness that would cause instant death. The decision was made in an instant, and his body was already executing the next move, the sphincter opener 9000. Lifting the goblin into the air, and slamming it down onto the ground behind him. The goblin looks pained, and Yun pulls the axe out of its butt cheeks and runs straight at it, saying surely it can't be hard all the way into the mouth. The goblin is still in pain from the forbidden technique, and Yun stabs it in the mouth, causing its blood to go everywhere. He lets out a long sigh as the gas masked man watches him, saying that he's hella strong and wondering where such a skilled person came from and if he is unaffiliated. Yun then notices something as a golden window begins to appear behind the goblin. The status window says that the item's information cannot be checked as the tutorial is still in progress. He says he's not sure what it's used for, but he'll take it for now, adding that it's a shame there's no inventory and that the tutorial needs to end quickly. The gas masked man then calls out to him, and Yun says usually items need to be distributed, but that person just jumped in midway, and he pretty much took it down by himself. He decides to bolt, saying he has urgent business, so he'll be going first, and that the smelly, rather awesome, axe is all his. The man tells him to wait, and Yun smiles, saying adios. The gas masked man watches as he leaves, letting out a sigh and taking off his mask, sweating everywhere. He wonders what Yun's deal was. Several hours after defeating the hobgoblin, as dusk fell, the situation seemed to have settled down. Yun walked his sister home through streets that looked like an apocalypse movie. The world was in chaos, and they were able to return home only after it was dark. His sister makes an annoyed expression, instantly asking Yun if he left without closing the door. He says it seems like it. She sighs, saying she's an idiot for thinking he'd grown up, and that they should clean up first and then eat. She wonders if there's even food left, not even worried if there are intruders inside. We see them making some stew and going to town on it. His sister is surprised by something on the news, saying this is crazy, and shows him her phone. Yun looks at it and sees a video of him fighting the Red Goblin. She says, "Look, someone filmed it on the street at the company yesterday." Yun starts reading the comments, and it starts to get to his head as he says it's not a bad feeling at all. A Hyun makes a disgusted face, saying his face is really off. He asks her why she keeps picking on his handsome face, then looks at one of the comments coincidentally that says his face looks really evil and like a violent criminal. Yun asks if it's really that bad, and she says yes, and that she keeps trying to tell him this. Later in the night, he goes to bed. He tells his sister that they're in big trouble. She asks what it is, and he begs her to cut the lights off. She gets annoyed he called her for just this, saying no. He says please, and she says she'll turn it off just this time since he's already had a tough day or two, and not to yell in the morning as she is too sleepy to wake up. He gives her a thumbs up, saying not to worry as the stage is a freebie, and they can have a beer on him tomorrow while he tells her about it. She says that his confidence is almost the level of a death flag, and she's not expecting much, but good luck. Yun lays down and tries to sleep, but he can't stop thinking about the goblin from earlier, as well as the gas mask guy, saying that he was really strong and wondering what stage he has cleared up to, and he wasn't meant to get past the second, but it's not like any of it matters, as he will clear stage 8 eventually, and become stronger than anyone else. He starts to try and sleep, saying that the succubus from yesterday was hella pretty, and even though she killed him, he is low-key excited to meet her again, down bad. In his dream, he starts to smile, saying it's not bad to have a little eye candy even if it's just the tutorial. He opens his eyes, fully expecting to see the cute girl again, only to see a nasty, ugly-ass blue demon. He punches it, saying, it scared the hell out of him. The monster falls to the floor, and we see it's unconscious. He wonders what the hell it is, asking if it's a goblin. A status window appears, telling him that he needs to evade the goblin horde and clear the goblin cave, and that they have poor eyesight but excellent hearing, and he needs to find a way to distract them. He wonders why they're only telling him this now, but more importantly, he grits his teeth, yelling, why the hell did the tutorial content change? Of course, it jumps to him screaming very loudly in real life, and Hyun gets annoyed. It jumps to a PC cafe where a man is getting hit in the face, and we see there's already another one on the floor. Once he falls to the floor, he glances up, asking the guy why someone who hasn't even participated in the tutorial can be stronger than an ability user. The man says that not much has changed and there's no point in being stronger if you still don't know how to fight. He looks at the video of Yun, saying it's unfortunate that there seem to be many interesting ability users out there. He starts licking his lips. It jumps us this time to stage 5, round 3. The clear condition is to defeat the doppelganger, a monster that hides among the masses and eats humans every night. A tip, the paladins and the mages can use a special ability once a day. There are a lot of people around him this time, and he says it's similar to finding the succubus in the first round, like Mafia or Town of Salem. He thinks about how the entire thing is just him needing to prove his wisdom and what he needs to do. He takes a deep breath and then yells, using lion's roar, telling everybody to gather around, which startles quite a few of them. They all turn to look at him, and he clears his throat, saying, from now on, anyone who moves is the culprit. At this time, he had forgotten, as we see him back in his room, that in the Mafia game, usually the talkative one dies first. He says, come to think of it, I've never actually won a single game of Mafia. He never expected this, and he debates just going to get something to eat as he never expected to keep repeating the same failure for over a month and a half. We hear him asking his sister how she is, as he pushes his glasses up, saying that this older brother of hers has been smartly reborn as he has donned a whole new look. She is shocked by how nasty it is, wondering what the hell she is looking at and why she has to deal with this right after work. He says that he's tried changing his appearance to change his inner self and that it has been 53 days, 53. Since he has died on this stage 53 times, saying that it means he needs to do something. They say to use wisdom to pass, and the content changes every time. Even a Mensa member couldn't solve this. She says it would be faster to get someone else's brain transplanted into his than for him to get smarter. He's surprised, saying he never thought about that. She calls him dumb, saying he's saying the same old thing, and adds that if he has the money to buy a suit, he should use it to soundproof his room because the lady downstairs installed a subwoofer. He goes back to stage 5 once more to prove his wisdom. This time, he's in a cave, wondering if it's a dungeon. He wonders what kind of shitty mission they have prepared for him this time. He's surprised and says this has been perfectly made for him, as the clear condition is just to beat an F rank dungeon, the Tarank's hatchery. It tells him that the level of the spitting Tarank's guard in the hatchery is 20, and to find its weakness and strategize. There are torches as we see the spitting Tarank screaming, and he wonders how the conditions can be so neat and straightforward if he just needs to kill something. He charges directly at the Taranks, saying he's finally found a solution that even Aristotle would somersault over. The Terrank spits something towards him, and Yun asks if spiders usually spit venom. He looks down after it hits his hand, which instantly starts to turn a purplish color, and he wonders if it's poison. He says this much is nothing as he cuts off his own arm to stop it from spreading to the rest of his body. The Terrank lets out a screech of concern, and Yun decides while it's confused to attack the spitting Terrank. The window tells him that the clues to the spitting Terrank's weakness are hidden, but he cuts the spider directly down the middle anyway, saying he doesn't need that. The spider falls in half as he has chosen to break through with pure force. He says weaknesses and clues don't matter as long as you kill them. Instead of looking for the key, he just decides to smash through and get it out of the way. A window appears, congratulating him for clearing stage 5. He will now receive a giant's power, which is B rank, as a clear reward. He looks at his regenerated hand, saying that brains are only for those with bad bodies. The giant's power enhances the muscles using magic power and increases his strength by 12 for 10 minutes, which is a 60% strength increase based on his current stats, which have gone up quite a bit. It jumps to a school, and someone is telling a man named Kwon Minsu to give him a birthday punch. Minsu sighs, saying to do it later because he's already exhausted from the damn tutorial. The guy asks him how stage 1 was, and he says it's just as scary as the rumor said, but he still managed to clear it. The problem is what comes next. There are no decent tips from stage 5 onwards. His friend tells him that just clearing stage 4 puts you in the top 1%, and they probably keep valuable information tightly guarded among themselves. Minsu notices something, seeing that there's a new update, and says someone cleared stage 7 yesterday and is going to challenge stage 8. His friend asks if this is fake, and he starts reading out what the guy said, that stage 4's theme is leadership, and you need to subdue all the members through strength. Stage 5 is wisdom, and muscle is the highest form of wisdom, so increase your strength. Stage 6 was cruelty, so you need to destroy both enemies and allies. Stage 7 is devotion, only destroy enemies. Minsu and his friend laugh, asking what this is, saying it's clearly just bait, and all the comments start flaming, saying this is clearly bullshit. We see that Yun was the one who did it, and he's furious, saying he went out of his way to share the best tips with them, and he is angry that they aren't listening. Hyun asks why he's yelling and causing a fuss again, and he tells her to listen, saying he personally revealed the advanced tutorial strategy, but nobody believes it. She asks why he's being so nosy and meddling in things like this, calling him old. He tells her to wait and see because once he clears stage 8, he'll become the 3rd tutorial graduate in South Korea, rising to the same level as someone named Han Seon, the guild leader of the Dongan Guild, or even Choi Dong-woo, the president of the Ability Users Alliance. His sister starts to hold back her laughter, saying, "My ass, and how can he compare himself to the geniuses who cleared it in one go, to those who have taken over 4 months to clear it?" He tells her to shut up, saying that he cleared stages 6 and 7 in one go too. That night, it welcomes him to the tutorial once more, saying that he has completed stage 7, asking if he would like to enter the final stage 8. He starts to go over the clear rewards so far. Stage 6, he got a grade B weapon called Belgon's Log Sword, which gave him the abilities of Berserker and Durability Enhancement. Stage 7 was Ronald's Armor, which is also B rank and it gave him the ability of Self-Repair. He says if he can clear stage 8, he can use these items in reality through his inventory, and he can use it to check the item that dropped from the Hobgoblin as well. He doesn't expect to clear stage 8 in one go, but as long as it doesn't take more than a week, he'll be fine. Stage 8 appears, and the window starts to change, asking him what his beliefs are. He's confused and thinks about it, but as he's lost in thought, the entire area begins to shake. The space around him starts to crack along with the floor directly below him, which startles him. It completely shatters, causing him to fall through, and he screams while falling into the void. When he opens his eyes once more, he is in the middle of a city street. He looks around, wondering what's going on. A woman passes through him, and he wonders if he is in some formless state right now, saying it's the first time he's seen a city in the tutorial, and he wonders if this is Earth. But as soon as he sees them, he realizes that's not the case, as these people are most definitely not human. They are Mark Zuckerberg's. They're all living their own lives just as humans would. The only difference is the way they look. He doesn't know what to think and looks over, spotting one of them who makes eye contact with him. He wonders if maybe he can see him because he's staring directly at him. But Yun looks back at the man and quickly realizes this is not the case, as they are not looking at him. From behind, a rift opens up, and monsters begin to pour out of it. All of the citizens start to panic and scream while running away from the horde of monsters as they keep coming out of rifts, one after the other. He says there are monsters he's seen before and monsters he's never seen as well. This is on a completely different level compared to the dungeon opening he experienced 2 months ago. It's like a scene from the apocalypse. He wonders if maybe this is what Earth will look like in 5 years once the Haken dimension is connected. That thought starts to make his heart race, and then a giant shadow looms over him. He looks up to see some kind of colossal entity that has now appeared. It begins to slowly stretch its hand out towards the citizens as they run. Yun puts his hands up to try to block it, but of course, since he's not actually there, the attack just phases out. A bright light causes him to close his eyes, and when he opens them again, he's back in the dream area. He wonders what that was. A voice then asks him how it felt as we see a formless being approaching him. Yun lands on the ground, and he asks them if they are a god or something close. The woman says no, and to put it simply, he can think of her as a kind of dimensional administrator. This stage is a personal interview with her, and he's free to ask anything he's been curious about. It is also a valuable time for her to ask questions. Yun asks about what he just saw, asking if this is the fate that's destined for Earth. She says that depends on what they all do from now on. He tells her that he doesn't get it. If she's such a great being, why doesn't she just stop this herself? She says that she just mentioned how she was an administrator, not a guardian, and she can only maintain balance. The status windows and the tutorials that she gave them all is the best that she can do. Yun gets annoyed, and she says now she would like to ask a question. Yun tells her to shoot, and she asks what beliefs have guided him and what he has been living for so far. He asks what kind of bullshit that is, saying it's a pretty profound question, and asking why she's curious. She says that after observing humans during this event, she became curious. All sentient beings are interesting, but humans especially so. Hearing how she describes watching them pisses him off, and he says that he guesses she hasn't observed enough. At least in his circle, no one lives their life thinking about shit like that. They're just struggling to be a bit happier since the day they were born and surviving day by day. She asks him if he has anything he wants to protect, and he says his bratty little sister and his parents, as he has to protect his family. She asks him if he has thought about becoming a hero, and he sighs, saying after dying a few times, he has come to know his place and that kind of cool but exhausting job is not for him. She says that from what she has observed, heroes definitely have natural talent, and Yun is closer to being untalented. Yun wonders if she is picking a fight with him. She says personally she is a fan of his. Watching him conquer the tutorial was something that instilled her with so much fun and excitement that he can't understand. He thinks about it, saying that she must be a sadist or something, but something crosses his mind, asking her about the 5th stage where wisdom is the theme and if the task was meant to change every single time. She does not answer at all and tells him that the time is up. She had fun and congratulates him on clearing stage 8. She tells him that the tutorial is just a facade as more trials will await him, and whether he wants it or not, she believes that he will become the hero who saves the world. He tells her to wait, saying the 5th stage was definitely her doing, but she congratulates him on graduating, and he screams as he gets sucked out, calling her a son of a bitch. As soon as he leaves, we see her sitting there staring, saying that she will be looking forward to meeting him again. A window appears saying he is the 62nd person to graduate, and he has acquired the title Tutorial Graduate. He says, as expected, stage 5 was her doing. He wakes up trying his hardest to scream, but we see his mouth is stuffed with something. He looks down, wondering what it is, and pulls it out, seeing a smelly ass sock. Hyun says he's finally awake. She expected him to scream, so she plugged his mouth in advance. He asks if she really had to shove a sock into his mouth, and she says that if he's pissed, then just wake up quietly. Judging by the look on his face, she assumes he failed again, and asks how long he thinks it will take this time. He begins to laugh like an evil anime character and calls out his status window, which surprises her. He laughs, asking her if she sees the power of her brother, and that he's a capable person now. She says, "Good, it's time for you to go make some money," and mentions she made breakfast for him as a special treat. He says she could at least congratulate him, calling her cold-hearted, and adds, "No wonder you don't have a boyfriend yet." Then he gets smacked by a spatula, killing him and ending the manhwa. After eating, the dishes are cleaned, and she tells him that she's heading out. He says okay while looking at the status window, thinking about something, saying that the title he got after clearing stage 8 gives him +2 stats, and considering the effect, it's not that great. Then he sees the title option and wonders if titles cannot stack. We see that except for the chosen title, all of their effects are applied at only 50%, and he says, as expected. Then he should, of course, apply the tutorial graduate title. You can see he has quite a few abilities compared to when he started, and his stats are much higher. He starts to laugh, saying he's been waiting for this moment as it is the item he got from the hobgoblin. He opens the box to see a book, saying he can't wait to figure out what mysteries this item holds, and he holds it up, yelling, "Reveal your true nature." It's called Magic Explosion, and it's a skill book that allows him to learn the skill. The ability fires a magic orb with explosive power. The atmosphere gets really intense as it's a skill book. He starts shaking and then screams, saying, "This shit is gas." After 4 months of shouting in the open, Yun finally mastered the art of screaming in silent mode. The status window asks him if he would like to learn the skill, and he says, of course. He has now acquired the skill as the book begins to fade out, and he says this is good. Now he's all done sorting the loot, so he should go apply for admission to the Talent Awaken Abilities Training School. I guess they swapped off talented. Might just be bad translation. Outside, we're introduced to a woman named Onpina Hyun, and she is a newly appointed public servant. Her first assignment is at the Awaken Abilities Training School, where those who have completed the tutorial, or failed and got past stage 1, must pass through to obtain their certification. Her country's training system for awakened abilities is said to have developed rapidly, becoming one of the best in the world, and it's believed this is because a similar system already existed. They may be rookies, but they are still future heroes, and witnessing the start of their journey is incredibly rewarding to her. Or so she thought just a few hours ago, as we see there are tons of people there. She didn't think this many people would be there, and we see her shaking in fear. She says, "Excuse me," as she begins to cry while looking up at Yun's evil-ass face, telling him that he doesn't look like his ID. She looks down at his ID picture and then back up at his current face, seeing how much different it looks, and she screams, thinking he's going to hit her. She starts to break down, asking him why he's doing this to her. He panics, asking her what the problem is. Other people start to chat behind him, wondering what's going on. They wonder if maybe Yun threatened the woman or something, and one of them starts to record him with his phone. Yun says he didn't do anything. We hear another man asking if there's a problem. Yun turns, and we learn the man is named Kim Hyun. He says the process is moving slowly, asking what's wrong. Then he spots Yun, and Hyun says that Yun looks familiar. Yun says that Hyun sounds familiar too and asks to see his thing for a moment. Pina Hyun hands it to him, and he says that Yun looks quite different from his photo. Yun explains that his appearance changed because of his skill, but he swears it's really him. If he's still not convinced, he can do a fingerprint or DNA test. Hyun is surprised, asking him if he has only cleared the tutorial up to stage 5. Yun says yes, planning to downplay it to keep a low profile. Hyun says his level is 12, and that's pretty high, asking if he's done illegal dungeon raids. Yun says he lowered it by more than half, but it's still too high, and he admits that he did enter a few times before the law was enacted. Hyun says he sees and asks what exactly is the man's strength that Yun listed as his unique ability. Yun says it doubles his strength. Hyun thanks him for his cooperation, saying there's just one more thing. In stage 3, awakened individuals receive a skill, in stage 4, an accessory, and in stage 5, another skill, and he needs to see all those rewards now. Yun says Hyun is quite meticulous and shows him his skills. He says, "Alright, here's the skill I got for clearing stage 3. He starts to bite into his arm, ripping off a chunk, which surprises Hyun, and he holds it up so Hyun can watch as the wound begins to close itself using magic power. Hyun says he didn't expect a self-healing skill. Yun says that for stage 4, he got this ring. I thought it was just bad translation, but he told him it was called man strength, not giant strength, as his unique ability for stage 5. He decides to go with Lion's Roar, saying it's his reward and asks if it's okay if he shouts here. Hyun says okay, and Yun says, alright, as we see the man from the PC cafe in the crowd. He glances over to see Yun taking a deep breath and recognizes him as the Goblin Slayer. He then recognizes what's going to happen, so he instantly covers his ears, and a man behind him wonders what's going on. Yun lets out an extremely loud scream, startling everybody and causing their ears to hurt. Even Hyun is taken aback, and Yun clears his throat. Hyun is astonished, and Yun asks if this is good enough. Hyun says yes and then tells Yun to please head to the first floor of the adjacent Gunmo building. The blonde guy lets out a sigh and then instantly starts to blush while smiling because he has found him. Yun starts to have a completely different take on what just happened, saying that he was almost denied entry because he looked too good compared to his ID photo. And after drawing attention with a fierce roar, he is now in class. We see people whispering, asking if that's him. and they say that he yelled so loudly that the woman fainted. Yun says it seems like he's gotten on their bad side. He thinks something is wrong, but it doesn't really matter. We see the blonde guy also behind him, staring at the back of his head. Hyun then takes the stage, thanking everybody for waiting and introducing himself to them. He says that he'll be leading the training at the Seongnam branch of the Ability Users Training School. It's nice meeting them all. Everybody begins to clap, and he explains that the training will consist of 10 days of morning theory classes and afternoon practical sessions. Meals and accommodations will also be provided, and if there are no major issues, they should all be able to complete the course safely and obtain their certification. He adds that, as they all know, less than half a year has passed since the world has changed. Every day, new info about dungeons and monsters comes pouring in, and that's why tactics and strategies are constantly evolving. In other words, what you are about to learn right now is not the absolute best answer. Yun says he's talking about discouraging things straight off the rip. Hyun says there may be incorrect information or information that could soon become useless. Therefore, he will only teach them the things that are essential for survival, and he looks forward to working with them for the next 10 days. After a bit of time, he says they'll end the first period with this, and they should take a 10-minute break before the next period. We see everybody talking to each other and getting up, while Yun is staring at the ceiling, saying this is as boring as the Reserve Army mental training, asking why they're going to do this for 10 days. A man then approaches him and stretches his hand out, saying that his name is Kwak Soo-il. Yun doesn't say anything and wonders what's up with this muscle pig, but decides to shake his hand. As soon as they shake, Soo-il begins to smirk, and Yun realizes what's going on now as Soo-il begins to squeeze as hard as he can, telling him to take care of him. Soo-il says that he's got him, and with a guy like this, it's best to put him in his place right from the start. He's disliked him since the moment he started causing a commotion over nothing. Soo-il is then surprised and wonders what the hell's the deal with Yun as he is still holding out. Yun activates his giant's power, which, of course, is the one that increases his strength, and he begins to squeeze back on Soo-il's hand. Soo-il realizes that he's losing, asking how this is possible since he's devoted every one of his stats to strength alone. He starts to get embarrassed, saying that everybody is watching and he can't back down and look pathetic. He begins to squeeze as hard as he humanly can. The veins in his arm begin to swell up due to this and eventually burst, causing blood to fly all across the room and onto both Soo-il's and Yun's faces, as well as over some people behind them. The blonde guy is surprised and then instantly starts blushing again. Bro is a freak. As there is now a pool of Soo-il's blood on the floor, he lets out a scream. An ambulance comes to take him away, and Yun tries to explain to Hyun that it's true. That muscle pig came first and asked for a handshake, and then while he was grunting and puffing up his arms, he suddenly burst. Hyun asks if he's meant to believe that, and Yun says this is driving him crazy. There's no need to believe it or not, it's the truth. Fortunately, his unique ability, Strength of the Strong, increases his strength by 1.5 times, and if he didn't have it, he would have been injured. Telling him to check the game tape. Hyun says he thought he called it man strength, and Yun quickly realizes he slipped up, saying, "That's right, that's what it's called." Hyun says he thought it was 2 times, not 1.5. Yun starts to awkwardly laugh, and says he guesses he got it confused, as he's not good with numbers. Hyun looks at him suspiciously and then sighs, saying he understands and to please return to the classroom. Everybody watches him as he enters, and he sits down, saying he's exhausted from the first day. The blonde guy then sits beside him, calling out to him, asking if he can sit beside him. Yun says, sure. He thinks to himself, going from a muscle-headed pig to now a thug, and the blonde guy introduces himself as On Yusong. Yun then introduces himself, and Yusong asks if he can call him brother, saying he just turned 18 and finished the tutorial. He's a fast learner, so he's already graduated from high school, and tells Yun to talk to him informally as well. Yun sighs, saying he could be the older brother based on appearance, and Yusong asks how he did that earlier. Yun asks what he's talking about, and Yusong says the guy's arm exploded, asking if that was a skill. Yun realizes this guy is a freak. Yun says he's telling him that's not what happened, and that the pig's arm exploded on its own. Hyun then enters, saying it's time for the second period, and due to the significant delay, he will focus on explaining the key points. Currently, dungeons are categorized into 2 types, regular dungeons and incomplete dungeons. Regular dungeons are the most common, and they usually open 4 weeks after their appearance. As they already know from experience, dungeon opening refers to the phenomenon where monsters start pouring out from within. An incomplete dungeon is a dungeon whose opening time cannot be predicted. It can happen sooner or later than 4 weeks, so constant vigilance is always necessary. Some of them may be wondering how to prevent a dungeon from opening, and there are 2 ways to do this. One way is to destroy the dungeon's core, which would be clearing it, and the other method is to periodically remove the normal cores to delay the dungeon's opening. However, you need to be careful about the order in which you attack the core. A man asks if this is really all the class is about, asking if there's anything related to dealing with monsters and saying he didn't come here to listen to this useless lecture. Yun calls him a muscle head, saying that the muscle pig from earlier and these other macho types are a problem. Bro forgets he's also a muscle head. One of the workers tries to tell the guy that if he causes trouble, he'll be expelled, but Hyun says it's okay, telling the man to come down. The man is confused, and Hyun repeats himself, saying he's telling him to come down. The man scoffs, saying he seems like he has some pride. He steps down, asking him what he plans to do. Is this a Batman reference? Yusong pulls out his phone, saying 1 minute. The guy is confused, and Hyun says starting now he will only dodge and block his attacks for 1 minute. If he even grazes his body, he'll graduate him here immediately. Instead, if he fails, he will be expelled, asking him what he wants to do. Both Yun and Yusong think that Muscle Man 2 is arrogant and quite annoying, but they both begin to smile, saying that it looks fun so it'll be fine. Both freaks. The Muscle Man starts to ask Hyun what he takes him for, pulling out his weapon from his inventory and asking if he's sure he won't regret this. One of the workers tries to tell Hyun to watch out because it's a real sword, but Hyun says it's okay. He glares at the man, telling him to start. The man starts to get angry, asking why Hyun is acting arrogant until the end. He squats down and instantly charges directly toward Hyun. He goes for an overhead slash, but Hyun sidesteps, saying that attacks made with a warning are meaningless even if they're not attacking from behind. Surprise is the basis of attacking. The man gets more annoyed and swings horizontally this time, only cutting through Hyun's afterimage as Hyun appears behind him, saying that in the same context, the issue with large preparatory movements is that the enemy won't wait for him to attack. The man gets even angrier and turns, continuing to swing rapidly, but every single time he does, Hyun uses the minimal effort needed to move, saying simply swinging the sword is not enough. The man must be able to observe and understand how the opponent moves without missing a beat. The man screams, telling him that this is nonsense, and charges directly at Hyun once more. He swings for Hyun's head, but Hyun ducks under it, saying that an attack with all your strength is not the best approach. It undoubtedly makes your movements larger, and as a result, your openings become larger as well. Hyun then lifts his leg up, knocking the man's sword out of his hands and up into the air, stabbing into the ceiling. He says if you do that, you will get tired quickly, and that it's been over a minute and time is officially over. The class is surprised. Yun says that the demonstration felt like a video of a professional boxer dodging punches thrown by an ordinary person by weaving. But being able to do that against a capable person is crazy, and he wonders if there's such a difference among superhumans, among awakeners. He then thinks about it, saying that the quickness and reaction speed Hyun just showed, even he, who has raised his stats, would find it difficult to follow if he were to face Hyun in a 1v1. He closes his eyes, beginning to smile and laugh, wondering who would win. Yusong, sitting beside him, also starts laughing, saying he wants to fight Hyun. Yun hears him laughing, turns to see his expression, and wonders what's up with him, calling him a freak. It's the pot calling the kettle black. He says maybe he shouldn't have let this weirdo sit next to him. He doesn't want people to think they're alike. Too late. The curriculum of the Ability Training School consists of theory classes in the morning and practical training in the afternoon. Hyun says that today's practice is weapon technique practice, and they should take turns taking training weapons. First, they should train in their own way, and the assistant instructors will take turns correcting them. Please understand that one-on-one instruction is not possible due to the lack of manpower. Yun grabs onto a nasty blade and sighs, saying this is boring. Yusong says that practicing weapon skills sounds boring, asking Yun if he would like to fight. Yun gets excited, asking him if he's good at fighting. But Hyun then tells them that sparring is prohibited until the 6th day, and Yun clicks his tongue. We begin to see people training with their weapons, swinging them around. Yun watches and says he didn't expect much, but everybody is awful. He doesn't really need the practice, but he can just swing it around for exercise. He twirls the sword and starts swinging it around however he feels like, almost as if he was dancing. Hyun turns and watches him as Yun does extremely rapid cuts in front of him. One of the instructors says he must not do that and that he needs to work on his stance. He needs to narrow his legs and adjust the angle of his sword a bit. It seems like he's showing off a bit, but it's no use in practice. Yun is confused, wondering what this dude is saying. He starts to tune him out. He grabs onto the man's collar, asking him if he's that good at fighting, asking if he would like to have a go. At least that's what he would like to do. He starts to clean out his ears, saying okay, and he's putting up with it because it's a hassle. We hear Hyun call out to the man, and we learn that his name is Kim Shongun. We'll just call him Instructor 1. He turns to see Hyun, who claps, telling everybody to please pay attention. From now on, there will be a demonstration sparring session between the trainee here and Instructor 1. They are both confused by this. Hyun says that Instructor 1 will follow the guidance he just gave Yun, and Yun will continue to swing his sword as usual. They will only have one exchange of blows. The instructor is surprised, and Yun seems excited. Hyun then tells them to get ready as he starts to count down, saying to go on 3. As soon as he gets to 3, they start to charge in. Yun rears his blade back, swinging it as Instructor 1 blocks it. Yun then goes for another one. Instantly, Yun turns his wrist, which takes Instructor 1 by surprise as Yun knocks his sword out of his hands. It flies through the air, and Instructor 1 falls to the floor as his sword lands directly behind him, almost taking him out. Everybody watches, amazed. Hyun explains that the weapon skills they are training now are to prepare for actual combat. They are training their body to respond immediately to an attack. However, as Yun showed, you must not forget that the most important thing is the ability to react in the moment. Never think that what you are learning right now is the right answer. He tells everybody to clap and give a round of applause for their excellent demonstration. Yun did not understand a damn thing. Hyun apologizes to Instructor 1, saying that he ended up taking on an unfavorable role. Instructor 1 says it's okay, and thanks to him, he learned a lot as Hyun helps him up. He says Yun was a little surprising. Hyun says he really apologizes for that. Then, looking over at both Yusong and Yun laughing, he says that he really just wanted to check something, which is why he had them spar. We are introduced to Yun's precious training journal. Day 1, he recaps what happens. The theory lessons were boring, and the practical training wasn't helpful either. Day 2, not much different from yesterday. In the morning, they learned some tactics or whatever, and in the afternoon, more weapons training. Yusong seems really excited. He better keep his distance, as we see him swinging his sword around like a maniac. Day 3, he explains that the only one who talks to him is still only Yusong. He asks him how many stages he's cleared, but Yusong just tells him it's a secret. Instructor 1 tells them not to do what they're doing. Day 4, he was feeling down, so he drew himself killing a goblin. We see him wielding 2 swords as Instructor 1 tells him that each person should only have 1 weapon. Day 5, he's bored and wants to go home, as we see him lying on the floor while Instructor 1 asks him what he's doing, and he says he's meditating. By day 6, we see Yun's head down on the table, saying this shit is boring and wondering why Yusong doesn't cause some trouble. Yusong says that he said a while ago that they should behave and complete the course quietly. Yun tells him it's not his problem if he gets kicked out. Yusong responds, "You sure know how to say trashy things so casually," but he doesn't think he needs to worry too much. It's the 6th day, and from now on, they'll have sparring practice in the afternoon. Yusong feels like something interesting is going to happen and begins to smile, saying that's what his gut is telling him, at least. The afternoon sparring practice begins. We see someone getting their sword knocked out of their hands as they fall to the floor, as they fought Yun. Hyun announces that Yun wins and tells the next group to get ready. Yusong comments that Yun is pretty good at fighting and that he saw him knock out the instructor's weapon before too. Yun downplays it, saying his opponent was just weak, that's all. Yusong asks why he's being humble all of a sudden, and Yun wonders how he should explain it, saying it just feels like child's play. Overall, the level here isn't that high. He doesn't know much about talent or whatever, but it seems like the average people here can't clear many stages. He notes that the sparring practice will continue until day 8 but wonders if these people really have to keep doing this boring stuff. One of the participants screams while charging in, and the other screams in panic. As everyone watches, the man's weapon stops right before it can pierce his opponent, as Hyun stops it and announces that they'll stop here and that the winner is Chang Woo. Yun says Hyun is pretty good and that if he's going to fight, he'd rather go up against him. Hyun calls up the next group, and Yusong stands up, saying he's heading out. Yun says, "Alright." Yusong steps up with a smirk, and Yun wonders what he's about to do because he recalls Yusong saying that he feels like something interesting will happen. Yun begins to get worried, thinking Yusong isn't going to cause trouble, but starts to get a very bad feeling. Still, He reassures himself that nothing bad will happen since Hyun is up there too. Yusong is fighting a woman named Lee Yuri, who is a mage and will be using her personal weapon instead of the training one, giving her an advantage due to the spatial disadvantage. Hyun asks Yusong if he's okay with it, and Yusong says, sure. Hyun remembers Yusong using a sword before, so he asks why he's using a mace now. Yusong says there's no rule saying he can only use one weapon, and Hyun agrees, telling them to get to their sides of the stage and that he'll count to 3 before they can start. Hyun watches as Yusong gets ready, and as soon as Hyun counts to 3, Yuri summons a whole bunch of spells and launches them directly at Yusong. Yusong swings his mace in an X pattern, almost instantly shattering all of her spells, and begins to grin. Hyun is surprised, saying it's his first time seeing magic in real life, and realizes that means you can learn it depending on how well you do in the tutorial. He forgets the skill book he learned and wonders why he didn't see this during the weapons training, thinking maybe Yuri trained separately. Yuri makes a strained face, saying damn, as she begins to cast her next spell. An even bigger magic crystal forms in the sky above her, and she launches it directly at Yusong, who glances over at Hyun. Yusong raises his mace up like he's about to swing a bat, then takes a big step forward while swinging at full strength with his usual grin on his face. Hyun sits up, surprised, and starts to realize what Yusong is going for as he sees Yusong twisting the trajectory of the magic by guiding it with his mace, launching it directly at Hyun. As the magic gets closer, Hyun sidesteps it like he did with the other attacks. But while Hyun is busy dodging, Yusong quickly starts running over to Yuri, and Hyun realizes he's too late. Yusong swings down as blood begins to splurt everywhere due to 3 rapid strikes. Hyun's face is shocked, and so is Hyun, as they see Yuri's fingers all broken, though the rest of her body isn't visible. Yusong raises his fist, soaked in blood from head to toe, and smiles while blushing at Hyun. Hyun realizes Yusong was way crazier than he originally thought. Hyun immediately calls for Instructor 1 to get a first aid kit and tells another assistant, Lee Min-hyuk, to call an ambulance. We see him doing so, saying there's an open fracture on the right hand as we see her entire arm is just destroyed. Instructor 1 tells her to hang in there for a bit. Hyun starts to get angry and points his blade at Yusong's throat, asking him what he thinks he's doing right now, releasing a menacing aura. Yusong says it was a mistake and accidents like this can happen during sparring. Hyun asks if he's really expected to believe that, and Yusong winks at him. Hyun, disgusted, then sighs, saying they're going to take a 20-minute break and that everyone should be seated in the same spot by 3 o'clock, telling Yusong to follow him. Hyun watches and looks at Hyun's blade, recognizing it as the same one used by the gas-masked man. Despite the incident, the sparring practice continued as usual for 2 more days. Yusong wasn't expelled and still participated in practice, though it seemed like he had been marked as a person of interest, with all the instructors being extremely cautious around him. As a result, there were more victories by forfeit than usual, and they even had a healer on standby now. Fortunately, they passed without any major incidents, and it seemed like everything was about to pass by smoothly. Hyun goes to the instructor's office and tells Hyun that the training is almost over, so he wants to have a duel with real swords. Hyun blankly stares at him and sighs, saying that graduation is in 2 days, asking if Hyun can just pass quietly, adding that all of this has been very exhausting and that he shouldn't just come into his office unannounced. Hyun thinks about it, saying that this child's play is surely getting boring, right? Hyun keeps his hands on his head, and Hyun says he can tell right away that Hyun is also feeling restless and bored, that this isn't the place for him to be looking over documents. He then asks if Hyun remembers them meeting before. Hyun glares at him and says indeed they met before. It jumps to the gymnasium, and Hyun continues saying though it's late, thanks to him, they were able to prevent additional damage. Hyun says it's no problem and that he's just glad Hyun hasn't noticed that he scammed them for the item. Hyun then says that he recalls Hyun saying he only cleared up to level 5 and that he has quite an impressive sword, asking if it's the reward for level 6. Hyun looks down, saying he found it while cleaning up. Hyun tells him that's quite an excuse and summons his inventory, saying it seems like he wouldn't be willing to answer any questions. As he pulls out his daggers, he says he'll also respond with something he found while cleaning up. Hyun watches as Hyun instantly dashes off the ground, getting behind him. Hyun turns, starting to get a feeling, and Hyun moves hella fast, swinging at Hyun, who blocks it. Hyun says he thought Hyun focused mainly on strength, but his agility is also impressive. Hyun responds, saying that being good at only one thing makes you very vulnerable, and since he has recovery skills, Hyun should come at him with full force. Hyun says that he won't hold back, then instantly vanishes, starting to rapidly attack Yun from all angles, causing Yun to be unable to move as he swats away the attacks one after the other. Sick fight. Hyun comments on Yun's unbelievable physical strength, asking if he's really just tanking some of his hits. Yun starts to laugh, saying this is what a sparring match should be like, as we see him getting cut all over. Hyun says Yun's recovery skills seem to be as effective as he claimed, and if that's the case, he should be more aggressive. Hyun switches to a normal grip and thrusts directly towards Yun's head, saying he'll create an opening with unavoidable attacks. Yun smiles and raises his arm, allowing Hyun's dagger to stab into it. Hyun quickly realizes he can't pull his blade out, asking if Yun just wedged it between his ulna and radius bones. Yun smiles, saying that he's got him. Yun rears his arm back, pulling Hyun directly towards him, then headbutts him. Hyun's glasses start to fall off his face as he hits the floor. He looks up at the ceiling, stunned, and says that he is lost. Later, we see Hyun with an ice pack, popping open a can of soda. He says Yun is incredibly strong, and Yun says he could say the same about Hyun. In reality, the sparring match was essentially a draw. They had agreed not to use skills, but Yun's passive ability still activated. Hyun asks if that's really the case, and if it is, then Yun should say he won. Yun responds, saying that's not fair and there's nothing he can do about a passive skill. Hyun sighs and thanks Yun, saying he feels better after relieving all that stress and tells Yun to go back and rest since they have dungeon exploration practice tomorrow. As Yun leaves, we see a shadowy figure approaching a gate outside of the school. The figure glares at it, looks around, then goes invisible, sneaking in and closing the gate behind him. Nobody was around to see what happened. The scene jumps to the next day, where everyone is standing before the gate of an F rank dungeon called Geeka's Forest. Hyun explains that the Geeka monsters in this dungeon are stronger than those in an average F rank dungeon. However, there are two reasons why this place was designated as an educational dungeon. First, it is a field-type dungeon full of traps and more, but there are no threats other than the monsters. Second, Geeka don't live in groups, so you can lure them in and deal with them one by one. More details will be explained after they enter the dungeon. Hyun is all suited up, and Yun mentions that this is his first time entering a dungeon in real life, apart from the tutorial dungeons, where he's never even walked through a gate like this. As he walks in, he notices a slight sense of levitation when going through the door and instantly feels the wind passing by his face. He opens his eyes to see that the scenery is entirely different from outside. Everyone is surprised, commenting that the inside of a dungeon is pretty. Yun asks Yusong if they just go back through the same door to return, but Yusong reminds him that it was all explained in class. Yun then tells Yusong to get away, as he doesn't want to be seen as crazy, and not to talk to him. Yusong responds, "Brother, you're the one who talked to me first." Hyun announces that first, the assistant instructor will lure a Geeka in and give a demonstration. After that, they will hunt one monster at a time in groups of 5. He tells the assistant to start. Hyun explains that when luring them in, they should move to an open space where it's easier to fight. As they move forward, he continues to explain about the Geeka. Geeka is a bird-type monster, about 2 meters tall, resembling an ostrich. It has quick feet and a strong beak. An attack using its beak can even dent plate armor, making it fatal, so they need to be cautious. The standard strategy is to surround it with several people and tie its feet. As Hyun is talking, a window appears in front of everyone, stating that the central core of the dungeon has been removed, and a portal to the outside is opened and that the dungeon is about to collapse. The sky starts to shatter, and Hyun tells everyone not to panic and to go through the portal slowly, one at a time, before it collapses. He assures them there's enough time to move in an orderly manner. Outside, everyone wonders what's going on, as this indicates that the dungeon was cleared. Hyun starts counting everyone, confirming that everyone came out without fail, and wonders who on earth cleared the dungeon. One of the instructors calls to him, saying that the dungeon is about to break as it begins releasing energy. Hyun says there's no way and orders him to request support while making sure all the trainees leave as the dungeon is breaking. Yun asks what's going on, and Hyun says he's glad he is here as this is a dungeon break, and he would like the trainees to provide a little help in the front. Yun asks for more details, and Hyun explains that if you destroy or remove the core without killing the boss, the dungeon collapses, and the remaining monsters will jump out through the portal. This is why it's called a dungeon break. Hyun asks if Yun didn't listen during class. Yun stutters, claiming he totally did and that it was a test to see if Hyun knew it as well. Hyun questions whether Yun is all there upstairs and tells him there's no time for jokes, as the Geeka will start pouring out soon. He will lead the trainees, so Yoon should stay here. Suddenly, one of the birds comes out, and Hyun realizes the situation is dire. He tells Yoon he's going to leave it to him, but Yoon tells him to wait, saying he hasn't heard everything yet. Hyun starts instructing all the students, warning that if they don't listen to his orders, they could die. Yoon turns and smiles, asking if he's meant to deal with all of these monsters alone. He says, whatever, and prepares for battle. Just then, Yoo-song starts hauling absolute cheeks, yelling to include him as well. He comes from the top rope, delivering an overhead swing with his mace onto one of the geeka, taking it out instantly. Yoo-song's eyes go wild, and he begins to smile, saying that crushing stuff with his mace is the best feeling. Yoon cringes, thinking he isn't trying to match his freak, but admits it's somehow comforting to have a psycho on his side. While Yoo-song is absolutely mogging the birds, Yoon pulls out his sword from his inventory. He cuts the head off of one of the monsters and smiles, and then instantly starts going to town, taking out the birds extremely rapidly. Yoo-song is surprised, and Yoon tells him to cover his ears as he activates Lion's Roar, calling the geeka chicken-headed bastards. All the birds instantly have their stats dropped, and their morale decreases. Hyun looks over, and the other students notice that the monsters seem weaker. Hyun realizes it must be due to Yoon's skill, wondering if it had a debuff effect. He notes that support will soon arrive and that things seem to be going smoother than he thought. However, there's a problem. Yoon then uses Magic Explosion, creating a swirling blue light in his hand that explodes, blowing one of the birds' heads off, but also badly injuring his hand. He wonders what kind of skill this is, saying that nobody else could use it other than himself. Yoo-song is surprised and asks if Yoon just used magic, but Yoon says it's a skill he acquired a while ago. Yoo-song asks if it's from the tutorial. Yoon says it's a secret. Yoo-song then notices something, and they both feel the ground beginning to shake as a giant red bird appears behind the others. It's a mutant geeka, a boss monster. Hyun says this is bad, as the reinforcements haven't arrived yet. No matter how much Yoon has already dealt with, a boss with that huge of a physique is another problem. Even if it's Yoo-song and Yoon, this is the first time they've encountered a real monster. Yoo-song begins to say bro, that's mine, and that he should please give it to his younger brother, and Yoon says bullshit, as that is his. I love the psycho energy. We hear someone talking to Hyun as they asked about the accident that happened during the dungeon practice today. Hyun says that's right, and that someone broke into the training dungeon and intentionally set off a dungeon break. It is speculated that this is an extension of the dungeon terror that has been going on since last month. The woman thinks about it, asking if there were any trainees who stood out. Hyun says yes, there were 2 of them. They were the ones that dealt with the dungeon boss, Mutant Geika. She seems interested, and he continues, saying that one of them has overwhelming physical strength. But his speed and agility, pretty much everything about him, is at a monstrous level. However, his greatest strength is his healing power. Not only his endurance, but also the recklessness without any fear of getting hurt, resulted in his unpredictable tactics, which may be the most difficult thing for an enemy to deal with. The other one is a completely different type. He wonders if he should call him a genius, saying that he is a trainee born with excellent fighting sense. His quick reflexes and tactical proficiency are outstanding, but his overly cruel nature is a big flaw. She says, disregarding that last line, it's rare for Hyun to praise someone that much, asking if he made a recruitment offer. He says it's illegal to scout the trainees when you are an instructor, and she calls him as inflexible as usual. He laughs, saying it's natural for employees to resemble their boss's personality, as he calls her their guild leader. We learn that this is Sian, who was mentioned earlier in the story. She says it's good to be an instructor, but to please return to the guild soon. This accident feels very strange to her, and he says he understands. It jumps to a man, thanking everybody for the hard work they put in over the past 10 days. He hopes everybody grows up to be a great person. This concludes the graduation ceremony. Yoon wonders if that's the principal, saying it's his first time seeing him. Since he has seen Hyun's face so many times, he thought that Hyun was the biggest person here. As soon as they leave, a man says, "Master, please get in," and Yoon is surprised, asking Yoo-song if he was born with a silver spoon as they see a limo. He tells Yoon to get in, saying he'll take him home. Yoon thanks him, and then gets into the car, saying he's never tried a car like this before. Hyun then calls out to him, and Yoon says the wrong name again, but Hyun corrects him. He asks Hyun if he's here to say goodbye, saying that he is surprisingly the affectionate type. Hyun sighs, saying it's not like that, but he can just say it is, and that the dungeon break accident that happened yesterday and the clear rewards will be given to both of them. He tells Yoon they'll be contacting him and Yoo-song very soon. Then turns saying goodbye. Yun asks if he came all this way only to say that, and tells him he should give some words of gratitude. Hyun sighs, telling him that he knows he's strong, and he's probably going to keep growing stronger, and he's sure they won't have to wait long before they meet in a dungeon soon. However, he tells him to please never forget his responsibility as a person with abilities, since he is now an ability user. We see Yun showing off his card while it's stuck to his forehead with a very serious face, asking her if she sees his potential. She's on her phone, sarcastically saying yeah, and that it's so great and admirable. He says that her arrogant behavior should stop from today onwards, as starting tomorrow he'll run through all the dungeons in the area. Then he thinks about it, asking how he's meant to get there, wondering if he can find a dungeon by searching on the map. She says that there's an app for it called Radar, and he calls her a genius. She says that in the past he was super smart with this kind of stuff, and it feels like he's getting dumber as time goes on. He explains he researched reading the app, and it talks about dungeon maps, monster information, and also recruiting party members. He said the Geika's forest was an F class, and he wonders if he can just do it on his own since he can handle that much. He thinks he can make a lot of money and brag to mom about it. The calendar shows a month going by, and on the news it says that the reward for clearing the lowest grade F rank dungeon is 20 million won, the Korean currency. The magic stone attracting attention is a new energy source, and is said to be dropped by monsters. Then we hear Yun's father asking his mother if she's heard from Yun these days, and he heard he got a license or something last month. She then tells him that Yun actually sent them 10 million as pocket money, and it looks like they got a used car last week. The dad is surprised, saying now Yun earns more than his father, and he laughs. His mother puts down the plate, saying she's worried. She heard there's a lot of people getting hurt and dying, and she wonders if something will happen. He says to let Yun be, it's better to let him do this than be unemployed. On television, they say that when you go into a dungeon, you form a team. The father says Yun's not the type of person to do things recklessly, so it'll be fine, he guesses. She says that she guesses too, and that he's always been smart since he was young. I don't know if we genuinely are talking about the same character. We then see Yun taking out a bunch of Tarangs. He's easily handling hordes of them all by himself, and as their body parts fly around, he says that this much is nothing, telling even more to come, and he starts laughing maniacally while slicing them into pieces. Outside the dungeon, we see his car, which he has given the nickname Buntley. His phone is ringing, and his mother says he's not answering. The father says he must be sleeping or something, and that she shouldn't wake him for no reason, and just call tomorrow. She says that she guesses so, and the father says to make sure she tells him about that tomorrow. She asks about what, and he says about the thing that appeared in front of the supermarket. She asks why he would tell him that, saying that the country will take care of it. He asks why they'd wait for that when they can just get Yun and his party to clear it. We then see that exact same dungeon beginning to open up, as hordes of green creatures walk out, and we learn they're orc warriors. A giant one starts to growl, but we don't learn what it is quite yet. The scene jumps back to Yun, as the central core of the dungeon has been removed, and he has been teleported outside. He says he cleared it in one day, and he wants to go to the next E rank dungeon, but wonders if it might be too much, and it's not confirmed yet whether he can use resurrection in real life. He grabs onto the handle of his car, saying he'll first go home and sleep, and then tomorrow he'll eat beef with Hyun. He sees that Hyun has called him 36 times, and he wonders what's going on. He picks it up, and she says that something bad has happened. She starts to tell him about their mom and dad, and everything else starts to fade out, as we only see Yun making a very serious expression. It jumps to the news as the government has announced that they are making every effort for a swift resolution regarding the large-scale dungeon opening incident in Hongriai. The Ministry of National Defense, in cooperation with the civilian ability user groups, has sealed off the Hongriai city area to prevent further damage, but concerns are growing for the residents isolated within the sealed area. In response, the Dongan Guild has stated that it will actively participate in rescue operations. We see Yun tying his shoes. As Hyun asks if he's really planning to go, saying going alone is scary. He tells her not to worry, asking her who she thinks he is. Even though he looks like this, he's still a tutorial graduate, and that she can just wait here for him at home. She looks really nervous this time, telling him to please be careful and not to get carried away. He waves, telling her he told her not to worry and to go inside and rest, as he'll bring mom and dad back soon. He starts whipping Buntley while looking hella angry. He gets to a military line, and they tell him he cannot proceed any further and to turn back. He says he's an ability user, asking if he can't go through. They try to say it's bad if he doesn't have a party, but another man says to let him through, as they said any ability user is welcome, but however, they are not responsible for anything that happens afterward. He understands, and thanks them for their hard work. As he's going through the woods, he says there are at least 5 confirmed open dungeons, and there is also an E rank mixed in, and he hopes they're holding up well. He wonders if he will arrive on time. He says if no monsters appear on the way, then within 2 hours he'll be fine. But, as soon as he says that, a big-ass boar rams into the side of his car, causing him to go flying off the road, crashing into a nearby tree. As we see the boar's eyes glowing red, it's silent for a second, and then Yun stretches out of the car, and he starts to crawl out, wondering what bad luck this is, saying this fucking pig just ruined Buntley. He draws his blade, saying that he will avenge his beloved comrade. The pig starts to growl at him. Yun looks up, realizing that it's actually quite big. Then, he hears a screeching sound, and he glances over to see a big group of mobs running in. They are all goblins, heading straight towards him. He wonders if he burned down a goblin country in his past life or something. Just when he thinks he has forgotten about them, they show up and cause trouble. Forget about winning, he doesn't have time to deal with all of them. He starts to run, saying that they say the best revenge is forgiveness, and tells the pig that he's gotta go and to have a good time. As the pig starts to growl, we see a volley of arrows flying from its side, as the goblins are killing it for what I assume is food. Yun sighs, saying that's right, if they want to fight, they should fight among themselves. Now that Buntley is gone, he can't waste time on unnecessary things. I don't know why they changed the name from Buntley to Bentley, Buntley sounds better, keeping it. That night, we see him gassed out, saying he guessed it's too hard to arrive on foot on the same day. He needed to save battery, so he can't even turn on his flashlight, as he has 20% left. He says if he had known it would take this long, he would have taken the main road. He hears a weird sound in the woods, and we see something slowly approaching him from behind. As he turns, making eye contact with it, he slices his sword as only blood follows. We see it was an invisible wolf, called a disrufin. Once it falls to the floor, he's surprised, saying he didn't think there were monsters that could turn invisible as well, and it looks like he won't be able to sleep comfortably tonight. Even more begin to circle him, slowly revealing that there's actually a whole horde of them. He readies his blade, instantly slicing multiple times, killing 5 of the disrufins back to back, causing their blood to fly everywhere. He lets out a sigh, saying that he can't wait to see what they've got. It jumps to the morning, as all we see are wolf corpses strung out along the forest, and Yun sleeping up in a tree, saying he couldn't sleep properly after fighting all night, and that his little sleeping area was also uncomfortable. He thinks about it, and says it's time to get going. Back at his parents' apartment, we see his mother texting him, and he tells them that he's leaving now and that he'll be there by tomorrow, so stay quiet and hang in there. It's been a whole day, and we see that she's messaging him, asking if something's wrong, as he's not replying. She goes to tell the husband, but he tells her to be quiet, and she wonders if it's really okay for Yun to come here. He asks why they can't just call him, and she says that there's a problem with the cell towers. He says that he thought it would be fine, but he doesn't know if that's really the case. The orcs that appeared yesterday, he thought he could handle creatures like them somehow, as they said they were only from an F rank dungeon. He glances back over the window, making a worried expression, saying he doesn't know if Yun can defeat the monster that just came out and killed all of the orcs. His own father can't even recognize him because he has such a villainous face. We see Yun laughing, saying that the orcs were just a warm-up for him, and that their adorable son has arrived. We hear Yun laughing, saying he's someone who goes through an F rank dungeon alone, so dealing with orcs is very easy. He hears even more, saying it's not tiring at all, even if they keep approaching him. Then he spots, above their heads, that there are 3 orc warriors, and just one of them is considered a boss monster. He says that this must have been an E rank instead of an F rank. He yells, telling his parents that he's come to pick them up, and to just stay there and not make a sound. They both recognize his voice, and they look out the window, wondering if that's actually their son, saying he's changed so much in the last few months. We see him heading straight into the 3 orc warriors as they let out a war cry. He readies his blade, trading blow for blow with one of the mobs. Another one comes from the side, thrusting its sword. Yun recognizes it and ducks below it. While charging the magic explosion in his hand, he puts it right to the orc's face, palming his head like a basketball. As it explodes, we see the orc's body fall over. Another one leaps at him from the side and goes to swing his weapon in, but Yun stops it, catching it with his hand, which causes the bones in his wrist to fracture. It hurts him a little bit, but not too much, as he goes for the instant counterattack, stabbing it in the throat. Then, While it's impaled on his blade, he turns his body, lifting it into the air, and throws it at the other one, playing orc bowling. The orc warrior falls on his back and looks up as he is in a 69 position. Yun puts his fist in his mouth, saying, "Magic explosion." We see the blue light appear from the orc's mouth as its head instantly explodes. A mix of Yun's blood and the orc warrior's blood drips onto the floor as we see his hand is destroyed, and he's sitting atop two of their corpses. But he realizes that it's just the beginning, as he sees he is surrounded by a whole tribe of orcs, specifically orc warriors. He hears heavy footsteps and looks up to see a giant version that towers over the rest, and it is called an orc general. It lets out a deep laugh. Yun asks if it's their leader, saying that he is actually ugly as hell. He wanted to conserve his magic for regeneration, but it looks like that's not going to be the case. He activates Giant's power, increasing his strength by 60%. He takes a deep breath, using his lion's roar, saying he can't wait to see what the boss is made out of, and charges directly at it. We see him get hit in the face, causing blood to fly out of his nose, and it knocks him back a little bit. He bumps into some of the orc warriors, who throw him back at the boss. Yun realizes that this bastard is completely toying with him, as he is just getting molly-whopped, then gets kicked in the chest, causing him to fall over. He doesn't know if his magic power is empty or not, but his body isn't regenerating, so he doesn't know if he can even be revived. We see him struggling to stand back up, and he grips onto his blade, saying that he can't back down while his family is just behind him, telling the boss to bring it on. The boss is surprised that he is fighting so hard on the brink of death. Yun screams while charging straight in, only to hear his mother scream. When he turns to see what's going on, he sees some of the orcs are climbing up to their window. Yun realizes this is bad and screams, saying they can't go there. He starts to run after them, but gets dog-piled on by some orcs. He manages to break free by cutting some of their arms and heads off, and starts to run forward, but we see the general stretch his hand out as he grabs onto Yun, smashing his head directly into the concrete. Yun says that he can't allow the orcs to get to his parents, as he looks up, stretching his hands out. His vision goes blurry, and he dies. Immediately after that, we see a flurry of attacks come through in a cross pattern, which instantly cuts the general into 4 pieces, as it's none other than Cian, who's come here. She resheathes her sword as the boss's body falls into pieces. We hear a guild member calling out to her, and she turns. They tell her that they've finished here, and she asks about the residents. He says they are prioritizing the evacuation of the injured, and they are also on standby to ensure the rest are evacuated. Cian sighs, saying that the damage is huge, but thanks to someone gathering the orcs in one place, there was less damage than in the nearby areas. She looks back over, saying that's him, right, the person who held out alone until they arrived. They tell her that unfortunately, he passed away, and she says to take care of the body with the utmost care. But, as soon as she turns back, they don't see Yun's body on the ground anymore, wondering where he went. We see him with his eyes closed, and then he jolts awake. He wakes up on a tree branch, and, of course, due to resurrecting, his levels drop by 1, and his stats are decreased by 50% for 24 hours. He says it makes sense why he's here since this is the last place he slept. Then he recalls them climbing up his parents' wall, and he realizes it's already been 24 hours. He grabs one of his blades, and he knows he has to go back there immediately. He drops from the tree, but instantly feels the stat difference, saying that his body feels heavy. He starts to run, hoping that everything is fine. He finds the place completely deserted. Of course, that also means his parents' house was empty as well. After wandering aimlessly all night, he comes across a military unit, and he was able to borrow a phone from an officer and contact a Hyun. Only then does he get the news about his father getting his arms amputated and his mother being in a coma. He shatters the phone out of anger, and we get a 2-month time skip. The news says that the Dogon Guild set out to hunt the boss in the D rank dungeon, Plains of Haiji, and that Cian, the head of the guild, talked about the new C rank dungeon that recently appeared. We see a Hyun asking Yun if he's going to a dungeon again, and he says yes. She says that he's already died 3 times this week, and he tells her that he's fine. She goes to tell him that it's not his fault that his parents ended up like that, but he closes the door and begins to walk away. She opens it, watching him leave, looking very concerned. It jumps inside the dungeon as we see a giant ant called an antria getting killed by a man with a spear, who levels up and starts getting hyped about it. They tell him congratulations on his level up, saying as expected from the party's ace. He says that he's an elite who has cleared up to tutorial stage 5, and it won't be long before he's done hanging out with all these losers. He'll soon be level 35 and ready to join the Dogon Guild. He's internally thinks he's a nice guy and tells them all that it's thanks to their help, and he's sure they'll catch up soon. One of the members asks what that is, and he turns to see somebody running at them, and it's none other than Yun. They wonder who the hell enters a dungeon alone, and the guy is surprised, telling him that the core room is in the front and that it's dangerous that way, but he ignores him and keeps running. One of his party members asks what they should do and if they should follow him, but he says they can't just leave him, and they should follow him quickly. As we see a whole army of Antria and Antria soldiers crawling on the ceiling directly above Yun, he uses an ability called Wayne's Secret, which increases all stats by 40%, except mana, when activated. Over time, the body will deteriorate. All the ants start to leap at him, and he slowly starts to lift his blade, getting closer to them as he uses his ability called 1/2 halves, cutting a big chunk of them into pieces and suddenly following it with a magic explosion, blowing up even more. He just continues taking out his regret and frustration on the ants. The group from earlier arrives at the scene only to see him going absolutely crazy, and they don't say a word. He slowly approaches one of the dungeon cores, saying he just acquired Wayne's Secret yesterday, and it synergizes well with his regen skill. It would have been troublesome if he hadn't advanced with higher physical regeneration just in time. As we see, his regeneration skill has ranked up quite a bit. The man asks him if he is okay, and Yun says yes. The guy is still surprised, and Yun wonders what's the deal. But Yun came here with an objective in mind. He grabs onto the core, saying that if there's nothing else, he'll take his leave, and to please get out of his way. They ask him if he's not going to collect the magical crystals from the corpses, and he says he doesn't need them and that he'll be going now. They instantly start collecting them themselves, wondering how much money they're going to get. Yun says that he doesn't have the time to think about that, as he is solely focused on getting stronger. The spear guy turns around, giving him one last glance until later in the night. One of them asks who that man was. He asks why it matters, saying that they're earning a lot of money, and that's the important thing. He tells her not to get so caught up on it, as there are different types of people everywhere. The important thing is that they earned a few days' worth of money at once, all thanks to him. One of the other members says that maybe it's that guy, the man who clears dungeons by himself. The spear guy says there's no way. Even if the rumor is real, this is not an F rank dungeon but an E rank. Clearing an E rank dungeon alone is something even Xian and Dongwu would struggle with. But as soon as he says that, they all get status windows appearing in front of them, saying that the core has been removed and that the portal to the outside is now open. In the boss room, we see even bigger ants, as Yun is sitting atop the boss's corpse, sighing, and he has acquired yet another skill book called Antria's Outer Shell. When activated, it will harden his skin. He says that Wayne's Secret and his regeneration skill are already pushing his mana, and if he uses this, he would definitely be out. He explains that using many skills doesn't make you skilled. For example, abilities like Berserker embedded in his longsword, no matter how painful, increase stamina and strength by 1.5 times for 5 minutes. However, during use, it impairs decision making and there is a severe after effect. He says it's useless if the ability is not used at the right time. No matter how urgent the situation was, if only he didn't lose his composure at that time. He shakes his head, saying he needs to stop regretting it, as he only has to focus on doing one thing, which is getting stronger by any means necessary. He decides to consume the skill book, as he can always use it in the future. It jumps outside the gate as everybody's being interviewed, and then a reporter says there are stories about a man clearing dungeons by himself, and that he was spotted entering this one today. The spear dude says that's not him and points, saying that he's actually coming out right now as we see Yun exiting the dungeon. He sighs, while starting to crack his neck as he looks over, only to see an entire swarm of paparazzi. He wonders what's going on. They start asking if he's the talent from the rumors, and if he's not part of a guild yet, wondering if he would be interested in joining one. He says he doesn't know anything about the rumors and he's not interested, so to get the hell out of his way. He bumps into a dude, who starts barking at him asking if he really just hit him. Yun asks what he's gonna do if he did, getting right into the dude's face. The guy gets hella scared and looks off to the side apologizing. Yun sighs while walking away. They say that he looks like he probably has a criminal record, and they really thought he was gonna kill that dude. He heads to the parking lot, unlocking his car, and he heads over to Buntley number 2, saying that was annoying and he wasted his time for nothing. A man then calls out to him, and he turns asking who he is. The dude says that he doesn't have to be so wary of him, after all, he's here to help him, telling him to take his business card. Yun looks down at it, and we see that he's a member of the Talented Association, and his name is Sun Yunyo. Yunyo says they've been keeping an eye on him for some time, and if he chooses to join them, they will use all their resources to help. He also tells him he doesn't have to answer immediately, and they'll be thankful if he calls them at all, and then bows, saying he's gonna head out. Yun watches him leave, thinking about it. He explains that the Talented Association was first founded to promote the rights of talents, unlike guilds that focus on making profits. We see him eating some cup noodles in a convenience store, saying that he wasn't aware they recruited people like this, but they didn't ask him to contact them immediately, so he doesn't care as he starts eating his food. A little girl points over to him with her mother, saying that he is a pig. Now bro is just catching strays. He finishes his 3 cup noodles and a couple of other dishes of food and says that his biggest problem currently is mana. His mana is being spent almost entirely on Wayne's secret technique and body regeneration, so he's always low. Adding in the injuries and equipment he just obtained, he won't even be able to use his current attack skills. He opens the marketplace on his phone, wondering what to get, and starts browsing, saying that he doesn't see anything particularly useful. No more than 4 accessories can be worn for their effects regardless of the item's type. Instead of buying a cheap item that will only raise his stats by a couple, he should just look for something that's actually pretty good. Something catches his eye as they're offering information about a dungeon that drops a ring that increases magic power. The next day he heads out to a remote area, reading the guide. It's telling him there is an E-rank dungeon called the Goblin Village. The shamans that appear within it have a somewhat high chance when killed to drop a ring that gives +1 or 2 to magic power, which sometimes can be all the way up to +4. The dungeon's boss is the Goblin Great Shaman, and it drops an even better ring when it's killed. It was originally a quiet hunting ground with good income that was visited only by a couple who knew about it, but recently tons of people have been occupying it, arguing that it's their territory. He continues heading through the forest after veering off the temple path. While reading more, they are saying that the government doesn't even care about how ruthless people are inside as long as there is no dungeon break. The guy who wrote it says he hopes that a major guild will clear it after seeing his post. People start telling him that the major guilds are the ones sitting on it, and that anytime they find good shit like this, they keep it to themselves. Yun looks down at his phone, wondering if it's even true, asking if there is no one here, and he thought there'd be at least somebody guarding the entrance. But he low-key doesn't care as he opens the door. He heads inside the dungeon, and on the other side, we see that it's some kind of tropical area. We hear somebody saying they can't believe there's another one, and when he looks up, there are 3 people standing guard at the door. One of the dudes who is smoking a cigarette says that he's wearing something real nice, and it looks like they're gonna get a decent amount with this one. His buddy says they are actually going to get a good bonus, and the woman says she dreamed of a fat pig last night, so she has a good feeling about this. One of the dudes walks up to him, asking if he didn't hear that this is the territory of the Bait Guild. Yun asks why he cares, and the dude says that when he enters someone else's territory without permission, he has to pay, and if he gives them everything they have, they'll spare his life. The woman is surprised as their friend gets sent flying past them, landing on the ground, and they turn, seeing that he's foaming out of the mouth. Yun looks absolutely pissed. They immediately draw their weapons, asking if he really wants to die, and Cigarette leaps at him with an overhead attack. Yun catches the blade with his bare hands and shatters it, returning with a kick to the dude's chest, sending him flying. He says he really likes people like them, asking if they know why. As he starts stomping the dude's head, he says that it's because if he beats the shit out of them, he doesn't have to feel bad. A mana attack then flies in, hitting him in the back, and when he turns, glaring at her while the smoke is still leaving from her hand, we see her shaking with fear, telling him to stop, calling him a freak. He says he didn't know mana explosion was a long-range skill and thanks her for teaching him something new. He then grabs onto her hand, saying in exchange, he'll teach her something as well. She's surprised, and he says that the power is better if you use it like this, as he uses mana explosion on her hands. It was called magic explosion before, translation changed. She starts screaming out in pain and falls to the floor, holding onto her bloody, disheveled hand. Yun says they're just a bunch of nobodies, and then turns, asking who these people are as we see a whole new group have approached him. They look pissed, asking if he knows he's in the territory of the Bait Guild. The dude tells him he should give up on returning home alive. Yun now understands the situation, saying this is as good as he needed a guide anyway, and starts laughing. A man explains that the tutorial changed his life entirely. That dungeons where power alone decides your rank is something he loved, as well as violence and money. And someone like him, who was just another cog in society's machine, now lives a plentiful life in this new world. And he's become an executive in a big guild, which is none other than the Bait Guild. And he feels like they put wings on a tiger. Inside dungeons, he has nothing to be afraid of. And this is the same dude who was telling Yun he should give up on returning home alive. Before he can even react, we see Yun in his face, coming in with a crazy punch. When the dude wakes up, he's looking up at the sky, wondering what's going on. As he looks around, all of his men are down. He asks what the hell just happened. Yun clicks his tongue, saying he can't believe he didn't dodge one of the attacks as he was stabbed. Bro on the floor can't believe they all lost to one unarmed man. Yun pulls out the knife that was lodged into his side and says that he's going to give them 5 seconds, and they need to all gather in front of him, as he's going to select who his guide is going to be. Then licks the blood, that cannot be sanitary. He tells them to line up for the selection. After a bit, through a fair evaluation, he has chosen the Bait Guild's grunt, Kim Sun-woo. He tells everybody to clap for him, but nobody moves at all, and he puts the knife to their throat, telling them to clap, and they immediately follow. The dude asks what's going to happen to them now, and Yun thinks about it, asking if they'll stop acting like this and live honest lives. They say yes, and they'll never do anything bad again, only for Yun to hit the dude with the left, followed by another one instantly to the face. As blood starts to fly, he asks if they really thought he'd believe this, as murderers like themselves will never just be able to live a normal life again. He starts beating them pretty much to death, and Sun-woo is terrified. One of the dudes does his best to raise his hand but has no strength, and Yun decides it's probably good enough and tells Sun-woo it's time to leave. As time starts to pass, he explains that not all dungeons are like this, but some dungeon archetypes can exceed the size of a city. He says this place is way too damn big, saying surely he's not being led in circles on purpose. Sun-woo says of course not, and he's trying to find the path with the fewest monsters. Yun tells him that's a useless thing to worry about, and they can just go where the monsters are, because he's bored. The dude asks if he's serious, saying he can go find some right now. Yun asks if he's crazy, saying it's getting dark. The dude is confused. Yun says to forget it, and they can just eat, asking what he's got on him. The dude says he'll handle it, as he sets up a campfire. He starts cooking their food, and Yun asks if it's almost done. The dude says yes, but he doesn't know why he carries so many swords, as that's what he's using to prop up their pots. Yun says that instant ramen in a mess tin sure is nostalgic, and it's been a while since he's had this. He grabs onto it, even though it's still hella hot. Sun-woo asks if his hand's okay. He says it's not that bad, and hands him his, telling him to enjoy the meal. Even though bro is the one who made it, Yun starts slurping it up, and so does Sun-woo. Yun asks Sun-woo how old he is. He tells him he's 25, and he asks what he was doing before becoming a talent. Wondering if he was in college, the dude says yes, and Yun says he should have just stayed in school, asking why he's here doing something like this. Sun-woo looks sad, saying that he needed money. His student debt had been piling up, and he couldn't apply for a scholarship because he kept taking part-time jobs. To make matters worse, his father's business failed, and their situation got worse. Eventually the shock was too much for his mother. Yun calls out to him, asking why he's telling him a sob story, asking if he just wants to die already. Poor bro, he did ask. Yun tells him to stop yapping and just eat the food, as they need to rest up for tomorrow. After quite a few ramen packets later, we see them laying down. And Sun-woo wakes up in the middle of the night, thinking that Yun's asleep, and he stands up, saying that if he tries now, this is his only chance to kill him. Then he sweats nervously, thinking about how easily he bodied everyone else, and says that no matter how he thinks about it, he doesn't think he can kill him, and he'd rather just run away. As he starts creeping away from their camp, Yun calls out to him, which makes a chill run down his spine, as he asks where he's going. Sun-woo says he needs to go pee, and Yun says to just do it right here, reminding him that if he runs, he'll kill him. And he's not just saying that, but he really will do it. The next day, we see Sun-woo pointing towards something in the woods, saying that what he sees there is the Goblin Village, where the main core is located. Yun says he sees as he feels lots of mana gathered around here, which Sun-woo finds surprising he can feel that. Yun asks if he can't, calling him a weakling, and Sun-woo laughs nervously. Internally, he's telling himself to stay calm, as Yun won't be harassing him much longer, as he's going to be dead, and we see him laughing evilly. In the Goblin Village dungeon, the monsters are concentrated near the main core. However, they regularly send scouts all around the field, and the Bait Guild farms those scouts. None of the scouts have been killed yet. Because of that, the village has all of its troops, and he can't wait to see if Yun is going to live against an entire E rank dungeon. The goblins look alert, as Yun starts pulling out his blades, saying this is good, and goblin massacres are his specialty. As the entire village starts running at him, he charges forward as well. As he readies his blade for an attack, we see a backpack get thrown into the air and hit him in the back of the head. Yun turns, wondering what was going on, only to see Sun Woo running away, calling him a crazy bastard, saying it was horrible meeting him and he never wants to see him again. Hoping he dies. Yun watches him run off and starts to smile evilly, saying that he's fucked once he finishes here. A while later, we see Sun Woo gassed out, saying that even if that guy is a monster, he won't be able to do anything. But then he sees a status window appear in his face, as it tells him the dungeon's core has been destroyed and the portal to the outside has been opened. Sun Woo looks up at it, then does a double take, saying that this might have been the worst decision he's ever made in his life. Sun Woo explains that the Goblin Village dungeon doesn't have a normal core. All of its forces are concentrated around the middle, which is because the village itself is the core. And he can't believe that this kind of dungeon has been beaten solo, and he starts to shake, wondering what the hell he even needs to win against such an overwhelming amount of enemies. He says it would probably be the firepower to wipe everything out. Keep in mind these are Sun Woo's thoughts and opinions. Even though we know that to be true, Sun Woo says there's no way, and he was strong, but that's just not how he fights. As we see Yun smiling while brawling, Sun Woo continues saying that maybe it's great strength and endurance, although that is also important as we see him mutilating the goblins. It's not as if he wasn't injured as he's riddled with arrows and spears. Sun Woo says the most important thing is overwhelming defense and decisiveness in the face of waves of enemies. If he was able to endure their attacks and take the most optimal path to the commander, it's definitely not impossible for him to have killed the Grand Shaman on his own. It's a dangerous tactic that could lead to failure with the slightest hesitation. And he thought he was just stupidly good at fighting, then he wonders just what kind of dude he's screwed with just now. He's definitely some sort of exceptional strategist. Of course, we know Bro is making his own plot because Yun is not that type of dude. As we see his fist down the shaman's throat, he rears his hand back, saying that he knew it and that muscles are the greatest form of brains as he starts to use mana explosion. The loot he got from the shaman is a magic stone and a ring that was mentioned in the post, and he got the +4 magic power one, but it also gives him 10% mana regen. Yun looks at his hands now that he's equipped them, saying that his goal is achieved and he wonders if he should go deal with Sun Woo now that he's out of it. As soon as he heads out of the dungeon, he's surprised as there's a whole mob of people waiting, and he wonders what's going on. He says surely since they couldn't beat him by themselves, they brought all their men, wondering if they planned to gang up on him with the whole squad. He then starts to look around, spotting Sun Woo in the crowd and the other people that he beat the hell out of when he first met them. He says that he's going to give Sun Woo 30 hits to start and then everyone else is next. A man coughs, saying there seems to be a misunderstanding. When Yun turns, the dude is smiling, saying that they're not here to fight and he only wants to talk, and it seems like his guild members made some sort of mistake. He introduces himself as Yui Hyun from the Bait Guild, asking if he could tell him his name. Yun says nah, and the dude asks if he'd just hear him out. Yun says that he doesn't like beating around the bush, asking what Yui Hyun wants from him because he's starting to get real pissed. Yui Hyun says if that's what he wants, he'll be more direct as he would like to make an offer for him to join the guild. Wealth, fame, anything he needs, they'll give him as well as the position of an executive. Yui Hyun says that a powerful talent who's not yet publicly known is something they can't let pass by. If they use him as a figurehead, they can grow to be one of the most significant guilds too. Yun sighs, saying nah again, and Yui Hyun laughs, saying he didn't expect him to accept it immediately, pulling out a card, saying that surely he can look over his business card and take some time to think about it. Yun looks down at it and then immediately starts ripping it in front of them, surprising everybody there. He says that he knows his personality is shit, but he doesn't act like trash like they do, asking if he really thinks some third-rate gangsters can recruit him. Yui Hyun starts to smile while holding back his anger, and Yun gets right into his face asking if he's mad and if he wants to fight. Yui Hyun keeps himself composed, saying no, and he just wanted to speak with him today, and he'll talk again given the opportunity. Yun spits on the ground, saying opportunity in my ass, and he can't catch a break running into rats like this. As he walks away, Sun Woo says that he is so glad the crazy bastard is gone, though he definitely thought he was cool. When he turns around, Yui Hyun approaches him, but we don't get to see what happens yet. As it jumps to Yun on the highway, and he says that he was almost screwed over. It looks like there were about 100 of them, and he was too low on mana to fight, so he definitely would have died. He forgot to beat up Sun Woo, and this is all because of that bastard Yui Hyun, but he'll get his chance someday and he'll deal with him the next time they meet. We see one of the dudes from the start telling Yui Hyun that it's true and that Sun Woo volunteered to guide him around. Yui Hyun asks if it's true, and Sun Woo says no. Yui Hyun reaches for his sword, and Sunwoo starts to shake in fear, begging to be spared and saying he'll do anything. Yoo Hyun asks if he really wants to live, and Sunwoo says yes. He begins crying, saying he'll do whatever they ask. He then feels a sharp pain in his chest, and when he looks down, we see Yoo Hyun stabbed him with his sword, saying that a traitor shouldn't even think of living and that he's nothing more than a lowlife. He then kicks him over into the dungeon, and as Sunwoo starts to bleed out, he calls out to his guild master before the doors get closed behind him and the dungeon disappears. Yoo Hyun then tells his vice guild master to find out everything he can about that man, and we see him cleaning his sword too. The vice guild master says not to worry as someone else has already been sent to follow him, and we see a dude doing exactly that, trailing a car behind. Yoo Hyun laughs, asking how dare somebody refuse his offer in such a manner. Sure, he can be arrogant because he's strong, but there's no way that's true for the people around him as he plans to involve his family. If he can't have his way with Yun, he'll force it out of him, and he can't wait to see how long he plans to keep up that attitude. Bro is making a huge mistake. It jumps to a Korean barbecue restaurant. As the meat's being grilled, Hyun says she can't believe her bum of a brother is buying beef this often and that he sure has become successful. He asks her where else he should spend the money he's earned, as nothing is as important as food. She tells him to hand her the tongs so she can cook. He asks if her visit to the hospital went well and how their mother is doing. She says the doctor said she's fine and that she might wake up soon. Yun sighs, saying that's good. And Hyun says that she caught him smiling. It feels like it's been a while since she last saw him smile, as he's been all serious and frowny, nothing like his normal self. He asks what she's talking about, as he smiles all the time. She says that villain smile does not count. His stomach then begins to rumble, and he tells her he has to go to the bathroom. She asks if he's serious, as the meat just finished cooking. He says that he'd rather shit here than in a dungeon. He hits the restroom and washes his hands. After dropping a massive log, he says that was at least 2 days worth. He then spots something as a man is talking to Hyun, and we see her pointing at Yun. The guy bows at him and walks away. Yun heads back to the table, asking her if she was getting hit on. She says no, asking if he doesn't know who that is. He asks why he would, and she says that the dude told her to give this to him. Yun says if he knew him, why would he leave after seeing him? Yun opens the letter and is surprised as it says that it's from Yoo Hyun and hopes it finds him well. They head back to the apartment, and Hyun says she should have stopped by the convenience store, asking Yun if he wants some beer. He says no, and she clicks her tongue, saying that she'll go get some for herself then. Yun says it's fine and just to stay inside, as he'll go grab her some. He heads out, and as we see him exiting the convenience store, he heads back home, wondering what the hell the bastards were planning as they dare to approach his family. He wonders if he should stop going into dungeons for a while and stay home, saying that he doesn't think they'll go to her workplace. His phone starts to ring, and when he looks down, it's his father. He answers it and asks if he's home. Yun says no, as he's out right now, and his father says that he just wanted to let him know that his mother has woken up. Yun asks how she is and if she's okay, and he says they still need to wait and see, but she'll probably be fine. Yun sighs out of relief, and his father tells him that his friend visited earlier. Yun asks who, saying he can't think of anybody who'd visit. His father then says that the guy's name was Yoo Hyun, and he asked him to say hello, asking if it's from the neighborhood or something, as he's never seen him before. Yun starts to feel rage boiling up inside of him, and he's about to go ballistic on this dude. It jumps to the next day at the Talented Education School, and we see Pinayong, who we have not seen in quite a while. Her coworker calls her Myung, which I will also start calling her. As they're talking about their weekend, we hear a woman calling out to them, and when they turn, it's a woman named Shin Sung-ah. If I've introduced her before, I'm sorry, it's been a while since I've covered this series. She tells them that she brought some coffee, and they thank her saying she didn't need to, and she says that she's only doing it because she wants to. Then she heads out after waving bye to them, and they wonder why she's always wearing armor. Myung says that she's a little weird, but she's a good person, and to be fair, every group has its weirdos, and that Sung-ah is an angel compared to some other people. Her coworker says that she sure has a lot to say about weird people, and Myung says that is the truth, and it really was the worst batch of students. One of them destroyed their opponent's hand in a spar, and then there was a strange dude who intimidated her at the reception. She still has nightmares about it, as he looked like he was an orc more than a human. On cue, Yun appears behind her, still completely pissed off about the situation. She turns slowly, as he is staring at her. She makes eye contact, and they awkwardly stare at each other for a second, with neither one saying anything. She starts to sweat nervously, as his eyes are full crazy. Both her and her co-workers start screaming for their lives. Yoon calls out to them, and they start screaming louder for somebody to call the police. They even begin crying. He asks where Hyun is, saying that he needs to protect his family, so he needs him. They both stop panicking. Myung, still teary-eyed, says that Hyun was a temporary instructor, so he's not here anymore. It jumps to a meeting room, as we see him giving a presentation, saying they can estimate that the rank of the emergent dungeons will continue to increase, and because of that, more than anything, their recruitment of skilled individuals is what's needed. A knock appears on the door, and he opens it, saying they're in the middle of a meeting. The dude says that a monster-like man is making an uproar in the lobby, saying that he knows him. Hyun wonders who it could be. They finally meet in the reception room. Hyun says that he did say they'd meet again soon, but he didn't think it would be like this, asking if there's something he can help with. Yoon says that he would like to hire him. Hyun says that he's glad he's right to the point, asking what the details are. Yoon tells him that the Bait Guild is threatening his family and taunting him. He needs a bodyguard who can protect his family while he goes destroy them. Hyun asks what he's been up to, and puts down his coffee, saying that the Bait Guild is infamous enough that he is aware of them. However, they haven't been able to do anything since they lack justification. Yoon says that he will destroy them himself, and that it will be a win-win. Hyun says he's as brutish as ever, asking why he's chosen him, saying that he doesn't believe he was aware that he's part of the Dongan Guild. And Yoon says that he's the strongest talented that he knows. Hyun says that Yusong should also have fit the bill. Yoon asks if he really wants him to leave his family to that freak. He also doesn't know his phone number, and 1 week is all he needs because if he protects them for a week, he'll pay them a lot of money too. Hyun says he's not trying to brag, but he already earns a lot of money, probably much more than he thinks. He also has his position as a vice guildmaster of the Dongan Guild as well. So if he wants him to work for him, he'll have to offer him something more than money. Yoon says no way, and asks him if he's after his body, saying he didn't know he swung that way. Hyun asks if this is his way of negotiating, saying that he's going to drive him crazy if he keeps talking like this, so he'll make an offer. It's nothing crazy, but if the job finishes well, he would like for him to meet with his guildmaster. He'll still have to provide monetary payment of course, but if he agrees to this condition, the guild will likely help him. A bit later, Hyun says he's placed 5 bodyguards in his mother's hospital ward, and 5 more in the company where his sister is working. Yoon says that he's generous, and Hyun tells him that it's better to be safe than sorry, but asks if he'll really be fine on his own, as the Bait Guild is rather large. Yoon says it doesn't seem that big compared to his guild, and Hyun says a guild size is not determined by how large their office is. The Bait Guild possesses an abnormal number of dungeons, so there's no doubt they have some kind of backing. Yoon thinks about it, and Hyun says he mentioned to him he made an appointment the day he received the note, which means they have definitely prepared all of their available forces, and it would have been smarter for him to ambush them. We see a flashback to him on the phone as Yoon actually told him he'll do anything they want, asking where to meet. He says that he didn't have a choice, as his family's safety came first, and thanks to that he managed to buy himself some time to meet him. He then hands him his wallet, I think, and Hyun asks why he's handing this to him. Yoon tells him to park the car at his place, and Hyun asks if he's really going in there to die. Yoon says it's not like that, and not to misunderstand, he can't tell him in detail, but he'll be back alive and well tomorrow, and that he'll be off now. He walks straight into the Bait Guild, and Hyun welcomes him, saying they've been waiting as we see the entire guild is present. Yoon sighs, saying they sure did prepare a lot, and it's quite a grand welcoming, asking if he's ready to get his shit rocked. Hyun says again he's trying to fight, and since he's now a member of the Bait family, they just came out here to welcome him. Yoon starts laughing as he starts to have his little speech, saying family while laughing, asking if they know what it spells backwards, and that is go fuck yourself. Obviously for us English speakers, it's not even remotely similar, but in Korean it's pretty close. He then activates his lion's roar, as well as mana explosions as we see him charging up on his hands. He slams down on the floor, and surprises everybody. As the ground begins to rumble, he starts smiling, and they ask what the hell he's doing, while all beginning to look more and more panicked. The ground then explodes, and they can't believe he's doing this. Hyun asks if he's stupid, and if he really thinks the floor is going to shatter, as the floor is reinforced steel. Yoon reaches into his inventory, pulling out a sword, saying he knows that, and then he activates Wayne's secret technique, and Titan strength combined with swift strike. He starts slashing away at the reinforced steel, actually causing it to collapse, as every member inside of the guild starts to fall down to the lower levels. We see them laying there amongst the rubble, and on Yun's side we see it moving as he stands up. Sighing, saying the effects weren't bad, and it's the thing he got from the ant dungeon which allows him to harden himself. Hyun calls out to him, and when he turns, he safely lands on the ground, telling him to be rational as it's not too late, since they could be great partners. Yun says he's tired of the bullshit, and he already crossed the line. Hyun says that if it's about him visiting his family, he'd like to apologize, but to think about it, if they work together, they could even bring down the Dongan Guild, and that Seon is too arrogant with how she treats those who are not part of her guild, and that they could take them down, asking if he understands what he's saying. Yun low-key tuned him out, since he just talks too much. Of course, Hyun continues yapping, saying that there are over 200 guild members in the building alone, and the amount of members in the country is several times that. The Bait Guild is only missing one thing, and they're missing a figurehead, the absolute strongest person who can be the vanguard for their guild members. With him, the Bait Guild could expand beyond Korea and to the entirety of the world. Yun then starts hawking up a loogie, and spits it directly on Hyun, who sits there in disbelief staring at him. Yun says that he felt like he was listening to an elementary schooler's presentation, and he should consider becoming a YouTuber instead. Hyun reaches up to his face, touching the spit and looking down at it, and starts to shake, saying that he knew it, and that a lowly peasant could never understand his grand aspirations. Yun starts holding back his laughter and low-key cringing, asking if the rest heard that, saying he called him a peasant, and he can't stop laughing, saying that's a weird choice of words for the 21st century, asking if he thinks he's some kind of noble when he's just a thug. Hyun's face starts to get hella angry and says that he can't wait to see how long he can talk when all of his men are here to teach him a lesson. He tells them to kill him, and they all start activating different abilities such as mana restriction, mind corruption, and all sorts of debuffs as they all start flying in towards Yun. He activates his lion's roar once more, telling them to all get lost, freeing himself from the debuffs, and of course his rings resist status effects. All of the opponent's stats and morals have now decreased, and Hyun calls them morons, saying that he doesn't need them to restrain him, he needs them to kill him. They then start preparing different ones. Holy shit, it's the Thumb from Spy Kids. This time they launch offensive spells directly towards Yun. And he says this is what he's been waiting for, and he can't wait to see how well the Antria's integument will work against magic. As he hardens himself, we see an explosion from exactly where he was standing in front of Hyun, and the rest start charging and not even trying to give him a second to breathe. Even those from the upper floors start making their way down directly and towards him, coming in full swing of melee range. Yun's not going down without a fight as he starts cutting his way through them, making light work of the first wave. Hyun is visibly pissed, but I would be too if I had an entire guild losing to one guy. Yun takes in a deep breath and yells, saying they need to come at him all together, only for there to be explosions that follow. Later that night we see the building has finally calmed down and Yun's gassed out. While showing that the guild members are everywhere on the floor around him, some of these dudes are definitely dead. There's still a lot left, but he's got through a good bit of them. He's pointing his sword at Hyun and starts laughing, asking him if he's feeling okay, but you can tell he's nervous, and he says that with this he's a murderer, which is the same as them. Yun says that's bullshit, and if he's trying to make him feel guilty just to give up, and that if you try to kill somebody you've got to be prepared yourself to get killed. Hyun says that he should stop trying to act so chill for someone who's about to die. Even if he pretends otherwise, it's obvious that he's tired as hell as tentacles form from the ground underneath him wrapping around Yun. Yun calls him a dumbass, saying this is nothing, only for him to feel a sharp pain in his chest as when he looks down he sees his reflection in a sword. As a man appeared behind stabbing him, Yun says that with this he's definitely done for, but he lasted long enough. Hyun tells the Vice Guild Master he did great and that he'll deal the finishing blow. The dude says yes, and lets go of his sword. Hyun says lasting this long with that many injuries was crazy, to the point that he wants to replace all of the trash here with him. However, it'd be worse to have an uncontrollable beast asking Yun if he has any last words. Yun says that he'll find a hair in every stew he eats. Hyun, annoyed, says that he's still trying to act tough until the end and grabs him by the head. His hand begins to glow as Yun is filled with nothing but a burning pain as he is lit ablaze by Hyun's magic. As he starts burning alive, Hyun walks away lighting a cigarette and then exhales, asking the Vice Guild leader how the situation is. He tells him that there are over 30 dead and 50 with serious injuries. Hyun's pissed, saying that they lost them for nothing, all because of one person, and they should just grab the equipment he drops as it looks pretty good so they can use it to make up for their losses. His men start freaking out, and when Hyun turns around it's revealed that his corpse is not there anymore and it's only the vice president's sword. A whole day later in his apartment, a status window appears telling him that he's revived and lost 1 level, and due to that his stats have been reduced by 50% for 24 hours. He then exits his room and Hyun spots him, saying that she thought he wasn't doing that anymore. Saying that it seems like he died if he's coming out of his room. He tells her he's hungry, asking if there's anything to eat. She then barks at him, reminding him to take his shoes off because he wasn't raised in a barn. He apologizes, and she said that she also told him to take his armor off when he resurrects and to clean up his mess. And a bunch of other chores. It jumps to a whole 2 days later. As we see a dungeon called Kika's Gorge, which is under the Bait Guild's possession. The gatekeepers are bored, wondering why nobody's come by. They say there's a ton of rumors about the guild. One of the dudes says he's just tired of this and everyone they run into are just a bunch of cowards anyways. And whoever comes next, they'll just take their equipment. His partner laughs, saying they could also just take their lives. The dude then notices something telling him that somebody's coming. As somebody starts approaching them, there's no way this is the best disguise bro got. They both stare at him, wondering why he is in a gimp suit. And share awkward glances with each other, saying this is worse than Spider-Man's first outfit. Hyun explains that he learned something from breaking in so recklessly last time, and that was if he kept trying, it would be no different than hitting a rock with an egg. Of course, he has infinite eggs, so it's not the worst idea, but he can't put up with that many resurrection penalties, so he needs to defeat them one at a time. His plan now is to go inside their dungeons and destroy them in sequence, one after the other. We see one of the dudes crying while saying that he's sorry, and Hyun asks what he's apologizing for. The dude says that he doesn't actually know. Hyun then loosens the grip a little bit on his throat and throws him, asking why he's apologizing if he has no idea what he's apologizing for. While the dude is laying on the ground, Hyun throws a piece of paper at him, making the dude confused, and hands him a pen, telling him to write, as he wants to know where all of the Bait Guild's dungeons are. If he does that, he'll spare his life. Bro immediately clocks into his 18-hour shift. Hyun tells him he has a question. He asks how they have not gotten caught despite killing so many people. Even if they are very quiet about it, they are bound to get caught if they keep it up, asking if they bribe the police. The dude says he heard something like that, but he does not actually know the details. The fact that they always choose dungeons with no CCTVs around probably helps too. Hyun says that makes sense, and the dude tells him that he wrote down all of the dungeons he's aware of. Hyun starts reading through them and tells the dude he did a good job while sticking his hand out. Then his hand starts to glow, and the dude realizes he's screwed up as his head gets blown off by a mana explosion. Hyun sighs, saying that means he won't get caught either. Then he walks away, leaving the dude's headless corpse. He tells the Bait Guild to wait, saying that if they are the bad guys, he's an even bigger one. We see on the news the office for the Bait Guild is being talked about due to its destruction, and they made an excuse, saying that it was a monster they had in captivity that escaped. Everybody starts giving them some bad press, and we see Hyun slam his hand on his table. Bro is shaking with anger, and he says he can't believe that he had to use his pocket excuse. It was something reserved for only the most extreme emergencies, and it was all because of one psycho. His door swings open, and the Vice Guild leader yells, telling him something, only to get hit in the forehead by an ashtray. Hyun asks why he's barging in here without knocking, as he's already pissed off as it is. He apologizes and says that it's urgent because that man has appeared again. Hyun asks if he's talking about the nut job that's been trashing only their dungeons. The guy says yes, and that 7 of them have already been trashed by him, and more than 100 of their guild members are dead. Hyun wonders what this guy's deal is, saying that the more numbers he sends, the more end up dead. He tells them that they'll no longer do rotating shifts and that everybody should go into the dungeon and have them take turns sleeping. He does exactly that. Hyun sits back down in his chair, starting to contemplate his choices. He says 5 days ago, Hyun attacked them, and his corpse disappeared. 2 days later, some nut job began attacking their dungeons and only their dungeons. He says that he knew it, and he's been considering this for a while, but now, with so much evidence, it's obvious that Hyun must have had an accomplice. The corpse must have been taken with some skill, but there's not enough information to form countermeasures. He starts looking at his phone, saying that he didn't want to resort to this, but he has no choice. It starts ringing, and a man picks up, saying, "Mr. Justice served." What is the occasion? Not sure what that means, but it pisses Hyun off, and he says that he needs his help. The guy starts laughing, asking what he wants, and mentions how he's heard his guild has been getting bodied recently, asking if it's something to do with that. He says in the first place, he doesn't even know what Hyun will give him if he helps, as he's richer than he is. Hyun tells him that it'll be a fight, and the dude changes his tone a bit, saying surely he would want an entertaining fight. There's only one target, but the dude is definitely not average, and he's sure he'll be satisfied. Anybody else have a suspicion that this may be Yusong? Looks eerily similar. That night, at another one of the dungeons, we see the man waiting at the gate with somebody else, and he asks for the other man's name. The dude tells him that his name is Kim Il-woo. The other guy says actually he doesn't care and he's just going to call him Big Bro Yui Hyun's grunt. Asking when the powerful dude is meant to pull up, and if they're even sure he's going to be here. If he ends up waiting here for nothing, surely Il-woo understands that things will get ugly. On cue, Yun arrives, and I'm pretty sure it is Yusong as he locks in. He starts stretching and releasing aura. With a slight smile, he is also sweating nervously, saying that this is amazing. It's the first time his sixth sense has reacted so violently. It's always just been some vague intuition, but now it's currently screaming in his head, telling him that if he doesn't want to die, he needs to run away from this dude immediately. Yun then stops walking and asks him why he's here, confused, and it turns out it is none other than Yusong. Yusong is a bit taken aback but recognizes his voice. Yun asks what he's doing here, and Yusong starts to smile, asking if he's the one who's been going around bodying them. He guesses he's still just going around finding fun things to do. He recalls Hyun's words about how the Bait Guild has some kind of backing, and he says that now that he thinks about it, Yusong is really rich, and he doesn't want to think that he is the one doing it. He points his blade at him, asking if he is also a part of this shitty guild while releasing killing intent. Yusong says nah and that he doesn't want to be lumped in with these trashy delinquents, as he's going to hurt his feelings, asking if he takes him for somebody that low. Yun laughs, asking what he's doing here. Yusong says surely he knows Yui Hyun, pointing to one of the Bait Guild members, saying that it's their guild master, and that dude's got nothing but his pride, but he still got on his knees and begged him, which was super entertaining. Yun says alright, forgetting this dude was a freak, then says that he has no business with him, so not to bother him, and they can go eat out later when they have the time. He starts picking his nose, saying it's not like he has his contact info anyways, as Yusong comes in for a surprise attack. Right as it starts to land, Yun turns and blocks it with his bare fist, asking him what he is doing. Yusong laughs, saying he'll be disappointed if they just leave, and Yun asks if that's really going to be the case. As they start brawling, we see their weapons colliding. Yun tells him that he's not going to go easy on him just because they know each other and that he will seriously kill him. Yusong starts to shake but looks excited, saying that's exactly what he wanted. Yun immediately activates Titan's strength and Wayne's secret technique. Raising his sword, he thrusts it forward, which Yusong sidesteps but still grazes his cheek. He asks just how much of a monster he's become. They start trading blow for blow with one another as Yusong says this is the best, and he starts to laugh as he's enjoying it that much. Yun, on the other hand, says that fighting like this is just a pain in the ass to his plan, and he would have liked to finish this quickly. As they exchange blows again, Yun, of course, being the battle junkie he is, says that it's been a while since he's got to fight properly. Yusong laughs, saying that based on his expression, he knew he was having fun too, and that the fight is just starting. But of course, Il-woo runs in yelling, telling him to die, and they both look over, wondering if this dude's okay. Il-woo thinks that if he contributes here, he might become an executive, only for his head to get whacked completely off by Yusong and his mace. Yun is surprised, as it happened instantly, there was blood still flying off of the mace, and the dude's corpse lands on the ground. Yusong sighs, saying they were in the middle of something fun, asking why the fuck this dude interrupted them. Yun says that this just proves they're not on the same side, but he didn't expect him to just kill the guy like that. Yusun sighs, saying that killed the vibe as he really wanted to have a proper fight, and he'd like to continue the fight, but doesn't want Yun to hate him. Yun says nah, he's already really hated. Yusong asks if he knows what kind of man Yui Hyun is. Yun says he's a shitbag. Yusong explains that he is the Mo conglomerate chairman's illegitimate child, which is why he can run wild with his grunts. Yun asks what kind of shitty drama this plot came from and asks why he's telling him this because if it's a warning, he doesn't care. He walks away, saying that if that was something to stop him, he never would have started it in the first place and that he should just go home and sleep. Yusong puts his hand on his shoulder, saying that he should just finish listening to the end because whatever plan he's got, he wants in on it, and he wants to see that delinquent getting really pissed off. The next day at the Bait Guild, we see exactly that, as Bro is malding. He's breaking his keyboard after losing his 8th ranked game in a row and even starts smashing it into the desk even though it's already broken, saying that everybody here is useless and not a single person can do their job. The vice guild leader just stands there awkwardly because he was probably his ADC that fed. Yui Hyun then exhales and finally calms down a little bit, telling him to gather all of the guild members and assemble them by 8 o'clock tomorrow. The vice guild leader says that he doesn't know how many they can get, but Yui Hyun yells, saying he doesn't care if they're sick or if their family just died. He needs them here, asking if he doesn't understand what he is saying. The vice guild leader tells him that it's because many people have quit and some have completely cut contact. Yui Hyun says they can just hold their family hostage and make the ones who don't want to listen by force. The vice guild leader continues, saying that the guild's atmosphere isn't good and a lot of them can feel that the guild is in an uneasy period, and they don't know how they'll react if they tell them to attack their own guild members. Again, Yui Hyun starts to completely snap but does his best to hold his anger in. His phone starts to vibrate, and he picks it up, wondering what it is now, saying that he feels like shit. He sees an unknown number, and a man says that it seems like he's in a difficult situation. Yui Hyun starts to smile out of relief because he says his situation might have been resolved more easily than he expected. On a forum about the Bait Guild, people are talking about how they're going through their ringer right now, and they must be down bad as they are clearing farm dungeons. Yusong says that it seems like what they're doing is having an effect, and they only went around destroying dungeons for a week. Yun says he agrees, and it's about time to wrap this up as they walk away from yet another dungeon. Yusong says that's too bad, as he was having fun, asking what the plan is for the finale. Yun thinks about it, saying that he guesses it's fine since it's him, and asks if he can borrow his ear. He gets in close to whisper it. Yusong is a little freaked out, asking him if he's right in the head. Again, the pot calling the kettle black. We see Yui Hyun holding up a letter saying that tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock telling him where to go and making sure to bring their entire guild. It's written by a man called the Phantom Thief. Yui Hyun crumples up the paper saying that he finally wants to meet directly. Of course we know it's Yun. We see them standing in front of the dungeon. And Yui Hyun says that today he'll see his face and separate his skin from his bones. That sounds brutal. Some guild members say they didn't want to come here, but they didn't have any choice because they know what happens to those who don't show up. While they keep talking about how worried they are, Yui Hyun can't believe he has to handle something so important with a bunch of useless people. If only he had been able to convince that bastard last time. We see him on the phone. And it's the man that he thought would solve his situation. The dude says that he contacted him to see if he wanted a helping hand in this situation. He thought this was his golden ticket because he only had to ask for help from a bastard like Yusong because he didn't have contact with this guy. But to think he contacted him on his own, that is a miracle. And he laughs saying that he contacted him at the perfect chance and if he helps him he will reward him handsomely and his father will also back him. The dude asks what he means, asking who he thinks is backing who. As it seems he still doesn't know his place. He tells him that he changed his mind and he won't intervene in this matter. Yui Hyun asks why and wonders what he did so wrong. The dude tells him to go cling to his mighty father instead. Yui Hyun starts to burn the paper in his hand saying that the dude is acting like a damn child, and he is worse than Yusong is. He can't wait to see how much longer they will act arrogantly. It jumps to the same dude's office on the phone and he says that it seems like all the bait members have gathered in one location and it seems like Yui Hyun is at the end of his rope. The dude's co-worker or friend, not sure which, says they are still allies. At least on the surface, asking if it's fine for him not to send reinforcements. We are introduced to the man who is named Choi Minjin. Minjin says that it's okay and there's nothing more to be gained from supporting that trash. The other dude says that if he happens to die, then his father won't sit still. Minjin glances over at the dude while unleashing his aura which wraps around the dude's throat, lifting him into the air. He asks if he's saying that he needs to crawl, all because of one old man. The dude says no and he apologizes. Minjin sighs and releases the dude back onto the couch. The guy starts gasping for air. He tells him to continue what he was working on before and to find another financial backer. It jumps back to the dungeon called the Deslupin Forest which is a D rank. As they head inside, Yui Hyun asks what time it is and he's told that it's 6:03. Yui Hyun gets annoyed saying that the dude didn't even show up even after calling him here. He doesn't want this to be a waste of time. He tells everybody to keep their guard up as they don't know how many enemies there will be and they might be setting up an ambush. One of the dudes then points forward asking him what that is as something is hauling absolute cheeks towards him. Yui Hyun and the other guild members wonder what exactly it is, but then we see it's none other than Yun laughing like an absolute maniac with a horde of wolves behind him and he looks absolutely psychotic. Yui Hyun and the rest are surprised wondering if maybe he had a twin. Yui Hyun starts to sweat nervously just still trying to grasp the situation. Yun tells him it's been a while and he hopes he's been well as he has a gift for him. Yui Hyun puts his hand up and we see a little wolf cub that looks super adorable in it. Everybody else has the same reaction, saying that that pup is very cute. Yun then gets into a pitcher stance and yeets the absolute piss out of the thing, saying that he brought him a present. The rest ask how he could do such a thing, and the bald guy drops his spear, saying that he's going to catch it. As it starts to come in, he sticks his hands out and the pup is crying. The guy catches it and starts to smile, saying that he did it, and he tells it that it will be okay as daddy will protect it. Everybody else is also infatuated with how cute it is, and they ask how a bastard like him could do something so evil. Yui Hyun tells him to shut up, as they don't understand how bad this situation is. Because what Yun has done is kidnapped multiple of the pups, as that's what he has in his bag, and he's brought every single one of their parents chasing after them, which means this is going to end horribly for them. Yun then throws the bag up into the air, saying he has more gifts for them, as there are more in the bag. When they look up, they see the bag above them and it starts to tip over, causing the pups to start raining down. While they're distracted, Yun leaps forward, raising his sword up into the air. He swings down at Yui Hyun, who backpedals it. The hella angry wolves also appear behind, jumping over him towards Yui Hyun and the group. Yui Hyun puts up a fire shield to stop one of the wolves' bites, and then notices something as Yun is running by, telling them good luck. Yui Hyun puts up another shield to block an attack, and as soon as it starts to dissipate, he realizes this is bad. He says that the wolves are actually difficult enough because they can turn invisible, but now Yun threw their formation into disarray and he's making light work of the guild members. He starts to shake with anger, telling everybody to retreat and they need to head for the entrance. As they start running, they start thanking God they were in the back line instead of up front, and they say they're going to quit this guild tomorrow. But as soon as they get to the exit, Yusong sticks his head in, calling out to them, and they wonder what's going on as he starts to pull out his mace. He raises it into the air and of course starts whacking their shit. As we see Yusong's mace soaked in blood, he's finally made his way out of the portal, and the rest are stunned. But of course, being the freak he is, he's enjoying every minute of it. Yui Hyun watches this from afar, wondering what he is doing, asking if he has betrayed them or not. He starts looking around, saying that his plan hasn't worked out, but there has to be some way for him to escape, as the invisible wolves are tearing apart his guild. He looks to the other side, and it's none other than Yusong and Yun making light work over there, and he starts to think about how to get out of this. He shakes in anger, saying if it's come to this, he's gonna have to use his last resort. His hand starts to glow with a fiery aura. We see Yun stab his sword directly into a dude's throat before forcing it out the other side. He clicks his tongue, saying there's no end to these dudes and it feels like he's fighting cockroaches. Then he starts to get annoyed. Yui Hyun screams his name. When Yun turns, he sees him on fire running at him, saying if it's all over anyways, he's going to at least take him down with him, as he's used a skill called self-immolation. Yun sticks his hand up to block it, as we see a massive explosion follow immediately after, catching multiple guild members. Yui Hyun says the skill endangers his own life and its firepower is excessive, but even with this, there's no way Yun got out of it unscathed. We see him surprised as Yun's hand starts to emerge from the fire, and he grabs onto the dude's head even though he's burning alive. Yui Hyun is still just confused, asking how this is possible, and Yun tells him to stop exaggerating, as this much is nothing, it's just only a little warm, calling him a dumbass. He then kicks him directly in the gut, causing him to spit up blood and almost pass out immediately. It launches him flying backwards into a wolf's corpse, and he starts to hold on to his stomach. Yun tells him to sit there and watch, as he'll be the last to die. He can't let him go so easily after everything he went through, and he should make sure he enjoys watching his guild fall apart. As Yun makes his way back to fighting, cutting the rest into pieces, Yui Hyun laughs, going completely psychotic, saying it's over all because he messed with the wrong dude. His guild has fallen apart. He continues to sit there laughing, having a full mental breakdown. While the rest of his guild is getting slaughtered, he can't do anything but sit there helplessly. After a bit of fighting, we see mana crystals laid out along the floor, along with the corpses of the guild members and wolves. Of course, Yui Hyun is still just sitting there laughing because he's completely checked out and had a mental boom. Yusong gets close, wondering why he's going schizo, and Yun says he's probably having a good dream. Of course, Yui Hyun is just coping with the situation, saying he's finished. But then he starts to snap back to reality, saying wait a minute, there's no way he is finished, and he starts shaking. Yun notices something as he's even starting to cry, and Yui Hyun says he can't die like this. He was an illegitimate child and grew up being treated like complete trash. His siblings treated him like a stranger and never cared about him to begin with. They also pulled him into their fight for a role he never even wanted and constantly tried to keep him in check. His father sympathized with him and supported him plentifully, but to them, even that was just another excuse to tear him apart. But one day, The world changed, the tutorial started, dungeons and awakeners appeared, and the world began to once again run on strength alone. That's when he had a gut feeling that this was his chance to turn the tides. We then see a slash come through on his neck, and before Yui Hyun realizes what happens, his head is floating through the air and starts rolling on the ground. Yun sighs, asking why villain bastards always have the longest monologues. Yusong tells him that he should have at least listened to his words, and Yun says nah, he ain't listening to all that. He then puts his weapon away, thanking him for helping out even though it wasn't his problem. Yusong says that it was fun, so he doesn't care, and asks him how it was, saying the feeling of finally getting his long-awaited revenge. Yun says that he's not too sure, and Yusong says he's heard that vengeance leaves him feeling hollow, asking if it's something like that. He says not at all, he only killed those who deserved it, and if he had to make a comparison, it feels like he just dug out a huge clump of earwax in one go. It's not really anything amazing, but it does kind of feel refreshing. Yusong says that was one of the worst comparisons he's ever heard, and bro should be banned from making them. But Yun blows on his finger that he just stuck into his ear, asking what they want to do about the items that guy dropped and if they should just sell them and go half and half. Yusong says that he doesn't really need money, so no, he doesn't know. Yun says in that case, he'll take them and do it himself, as money is something that he's never been obsessed over either because he got a lot from clearing dungeons. However, this incident made him realize that he can't protect everything with just his strength and a little amount of money, so he needs to gather as much as he can and end up making his own faction. As they head outside and the gate starts to vanish, Yusong says well, this is officially over now. But Yun seems to be thinking about something and calls out to him, asking what he would do if he told him he wanted to make a guild. Before he can even finish, Yusong says he's in. Yun says that he should have at least let him finish his sentence. Yusong says that if Big Bro makes a guild, it'll be really fun, as that's what his intuition tells him. Yun says intuition my ass, calling him a freak, saying that he never told him he'd let him in. Yusong says that he knows he was just trying to scout him, and they continue their banter. We get a little bit of fourth wall narration saying that at this time, nobody knew that the small guild that these two men would form as a joke would become the most well-known guild in Korea. But obviously not in a good way, with these two psychos running it. It jumps to a giant office building, and we hear an old man, named Sangsu, saying this is not what they promised. He yells at none other than Minjin, saying that he told him he would take responsibility for his son, asking how this is not a breach of contract. Minjin turns, smirking, asking what he means by breach, saying his joke has gone too far, as he has no idea what he's talking about. Sangsu is pissed, asking if he's really playing dumb in this situation, as it's been over a week since he lost contact with his son and his guild members. Minjin says, so what, which surprises Sangsu, and he says that he took a piece of trash with no ability and made him the master of a major guild, and that he's already done his fair share. Sangsu starts to get pissed, telling his men to attack and kill him. As they all leap towards Minjin, he starts to release his aura, and of course, it's the tentacle things he shot out before. They wrap around everybody's throats and start lifting them into the air as they gasp for air. He then stands up, calling out to Sangsu, saying they clearly had an agreement, and he was fulfilling his end without any problems, asking what's with this underhanded action. Sangsu sits there shaking in fear, and Minjin tells him that if he does something like this again, he won't let it go, asking if he understands. Sangsu says he does but is clearly terrified. Minjin smiles, releasing his aura. As everybody starts to regain their breath, he waves him off, saying that he's glad he understands, and to deposit the money by today as promised. But it does make him pretty curious, asking who managed to bring down Yui Hyun. The bait guild ended up disappearing, and the sudden disappearance of a major guild sparked multiple rumors and horror stories. Of course, the media and forums went up in a roar for a while, as this was a time of sudden change. After a while, the bait guild slowly became forgotten amidst all of the other emerging talents and guilds. It jumps to a fancy house, and we hear Yusong saying that's good, and at least they won't be tailed. Yun says there won't be any problem, as he killed everybody who annoyed him, and he leveled up from the battle. They also disposed of all of the stolen goods through Yusong's connections, and he's getting treated to some gas food. Yusong says that means everything went well, asking what part of it he thinks is unfair. Yun is shaking, saying that the problem is he's got a new title, and it's called the Ruthless Household Destroyer. It's because of what he did to the wolves. The title states that the holder will evoke instinctive fear in others and also gives him +2 strength. He puts his chopsticks down, saying the effective titles that aren't equipped are still half effective, and he's already stressed enough because of his appearance, and this is just going to cause even more misunderstandings. Yusong laughs, saying there's no misunderstanding about him being a vicious person, and there's not much difference anyway, so don't worry. Yoon's phone begins to ring, and we see it's none other than Hyun, but says his name wrong. Hyun says it sounds way too close to Hyun's, but surely he remembers the promise they made. Of course, he has short-term memory loss, and he asks what exactly he's talking about. Hyun sighs, saying that he knew this would happen, reminding him that he was supposed to meet his guild master and that they would like for him to do it as soon as possible, asking when he is available. It then jumps to the Dongan Guild. As Hyun is heading up the elevator, he asks if it's really okay, and he points, asking if he is 100% sure that bringing this thing along is fine. He means Yusong. Hyun says that the guild master said it would be fine, and Yusong says that calling him a thing is a little hurtful. Even though he looks like this, he and Sian are acquaintances, and he calls her older sister. Hyun says that hearing that come out of his mouth feels wrong, asking how they know each other. Yusong says they met at a party and starts to give a flashback. Hyun just wonders who the hell that's meant to be because that is not Yusong. Hyun says that the guild master here was also born with a golden spoon in her mouth, and she's a tutorial graduate as well, so the world is unfair. They make it to the reception room, and Hyun knocks on the door. She tells him to enter, and as they do so, Hyun spots her. Sian welcomes him, introducing herself as the guildmaster. He shakes her hand, telling her his name as well. She says it's nice to meet him and that she's heard a lot about him from Hyun. Hyun takes his leave, and Yusong tells her it's been a while. She says that it sure has. She then tells them to take a seat, and when they do so, Hyun thanks her for helping him, saying that he'll do anything he can to repay the debt. She says it wasn't anything difficult, so it's fine and not to worry about it, but he tells her that he does not like being indebted, asking why she wanted to see him. She says it's surprising that he's getting straight to the point, and he says they are both probably busy. She says that she wanted to get some tea first, but if he puts it like that, then she can't hold back. She then calls out to him, asking if he would like to join the guild and work together. Of course, he immediately says no, and she stares at him awkwardly but says okay. Yusong tells him that answer was really sharp enough to cut. Hyun asks if that's really the case, but Sian tells him not to worry. It's actually easier for her to give up on him since he gave such a quick answer. He says that's good, and he'll repay her some other way, and to contact him if there's anything he can help with. She says he doesn't have to worry about it too much, and it's not a bad deal for them to have a powerful awakener indebted to them. They'll contact him if they need to. Hyun says honestly, he doesn't know if there's going to be anything he can help the #1 guild in the country with. Of course, he'll do whatever he can, though. She asks him how long he thinks the current peace will last. He thinks about it, saying that the world is full of criminals, and they've been roaming about since the dungeons appeared. Yet she calls that peace. She also must have seen that scene in the tutorial's 8th stage, and he guesses it's possible to call that peaceful compared to this. He sighs, telling her that he doesn't really know, and it's not a problem that will be solved by worrying about it. For now, the only way he can prepare is to get stronger. Besides that, Haken Dimension or whatever still has 5 years on its countdown. She then tells him it's actually 3 years, and within 3 years at most, some countries will begin struggling to survive, as they have not been given a lot of time. He asks why she's so certain, and she says she can't tell him in detail, but there is a godlike entity that knows everything about the situation, and they have an awakener who can communicate with them. He wonders if she means the administrator and if there's actually somebody who can converse with them. She says in fact, surely he's been experiencing it, that the difficulty range of dungeons has been increasing, and the growth of awakeners has become stagnant in comparison. Yusong says he heard something about that too. They said that awakeners get stronger the more danger they endure. That's why hunting with guns has no effect. Hyun asks if that's really the case, saying that it does make sense that there aren't any awakeners using guns. Yusong says despite that, bows and crossbows still grant level ups, and there's quite a lot of theories about it. Sian says that it's as he says. The only ones capable of solving these recent incidents are people equipped with both strength and boldness like himself, and that he can become a hero. He says that he knows it sounds strange to say, but he's not actually a good guy, and that he is the one who eradicated the Bait Guild. She says that she doesn't really care about trash like that, and he asks what she means. She explains that people like that don't help humanity's survival at all anyways, and they are not worth protecting. One person like Hyun is more important to humanity than hundreds of people like those from the Bait Guild. The one who protects the world is not just some saint or someone strong, and it's a lot more than that. After a bit, Hyun opens the door, and we see Seon inside, and she asks if he saw them off. He says yes, and Evie confirms that Hyun got in the car, asking how it was seeing him in person. She says that he certainly exceeded her expectations. Hyun asks if that means her suspicions were correct. She says yes, it was just for a moment, but there was recognition in his eyes when she mentioned the administrator. So he is definitely a tutorial graduate. It jumps to a gate outside of an office building, and Hyun explains that E rank and D rank dungeons are only a letter difference, but there is a big difference between the two. There is an increase in the strength and number of monsters, but the most obvious difference is the variety that appears. Especially in this dungeon he is in now, a D rank dungeon, which is a research institute, the variety was even greater. As he walks through a whole group of orc corpses, he says normally the regular mobs and boss mobs are all the same type, so it's convenient. But this place has so many types, it's pretty annoying. He looks up, wondering what the hell this is, as he sees a chimera ogre holding a hammer, and its face is clearly stitched on. He says this thing's proportions are whack, and putting a goblin's head on an ogre is definitely a nerf. Then he realizes this is a good chance and asks the ogre if it would like to join his guild, as he made a bet with Yusong on who could find a candidate first. It then swings its hammer up, raising it overhead, only to slam down where Hyun was, who leaps up over it, saying that it could also just say no instead of this, and with this, it's definitely disqualified. The ogre screams and spits some kind of gamer girl bathwater at him, and Hyun says that shit is filthy, using mana explosion to completely block the attack. Landing behind the ogre, he realizes that the juice was actually acidic. He says that the monster has thick skin, and he loses based on weight classes, but he always finds an answer because he's an intellectual, and that his hammer is the only thing he needs to win. Bro did not just call himself smart. After a bit, some guys are in the dungeon, saying they've been hearing monster screams for a while, and maybe somebody's hunting. More than that, they should think about what's right in front of them, as they see a girl holding a bow, looking wary of the situation. One of the dudes says this is why he likes dungeons, and the other dude asks if he hears that strange sound. His friend asks what he means, and he says he told him not to worry about someone else while hunting. We see Hyun dragging the hammer, saying something about smell. They turn, wondering what the hell is going on, as he's finally made his way right behind them. He says he can smell it, the smell of some weak-ass third-rate criminal that he can beat the shit out of. They wonder what his deal is and what the hell he's dragging. As he slowly gets closer, he raises it up into the air, and they realize this isn't good as he smacks the ceiling, exploding it. Debris starts to fly out everywhere, and they put their hands up to block it. And he is still trying to brute force it. They ask what the deal with this nutjob is, saying it doesn't matter how he swings something like that, the space is too narrow for it. But of course, the ceiling starts to give out, and the dude looks up to see it. Hyun manages to scrape the ceiling away, slamming the hammer straight down into the floor in front of them, proving that dude wrong instantly. They all stand there, readying their weapons. Hyun sighs, saying of course it's heavy, so it's going to be impractical to use as his main weapon. He decides to put it away for now, shoving it into his inventory. They sit there confused as hell. One of the guys starts laughing, saying that he was wondering what was up with him when he showed up suddenly, showing off his strength. But it seems like he doesn't understand the situation. The guy then leaps off the floor, dashing forward, saying that disarming himself in front of a group of people is just asking to die. But of course, the dude flies in only to catch a hit in the face. As it turns out, it wasn't even a punch, Hyun just bitch slapped this dude. His head starts to ring as he falls to the floor, fading in and out of consciousness. His boys look at him worried. Hyun then picks him up by the hair, and he looks terrified. Hyun starts smiling super peacefully, telling the rest to give them everything they've got. They start calling him crazy and decide that instead of complying, they'll fight back, charging at him all together. He says he can't believe they're attacking him despite the hostage, and he tells the dude that it looks like he wasted his life. He asks the guy his name, and the dude tells him that his name is Gyushik. Hyun drops the dude's sword, telling Gyushik that this is for the best. Then he starts palming the dude's nuts, popping them. The dude makes a pained face. Hyun says that he'll make sure to get revenge for him. The spear guy who was leading the charge is surprised as Hyun is using this dude as a weapon, calling it the Gyushik attack. He hits another guy in the face, but poor Gyushik just lost his family jewels. If you want more nutcracker action, check out the last video, link in the description. Once they see their friend fall to the floor, they stop moving, looking down at him confused. Hyun's new weapon might be broken because it's leaking. Hyun says the impact didn't feel bad. He flips him over, telling the rest to come at him. and he'll take them on with his new weapon, Gushik the battering ram. They're all surprised and start shaking in fear, telling him not to get any closer. Like out of some horror movie, they stand there like deer in headlights, only to helplessly get beaten by their homie. One of them screams, saying that their lips touched. R.I.P. The woman from earlier just stands there witnessing this. After Yun defeats them all, she stands there. He guesses it was because they were a D-ranked clear party that it took longer than he expected. The woman then calls out to him and bows, thanking him for helping her. She says thanks to him, she didn't meet a terrible fate. He says it's nothing big, and beating them up on its own was quite fun, telling her to raise her head. I didn't recognize her before, but it is none other than Sung Ah. She introduces herself, asking for his name. He says she doesn't have to be so polite. She then calls him sir, asking what she must do to become as strong as him. She is highly determined. He's just caught off guard that she's being genuine. The narrator comes back, saying this was a historic moment when South Korea's worst troublemakers were united, though it would be a while before they realized that. He asks if she's talking about becoming stronger, saying that it's only if she tries hard and puts in effort. She says that if they're talking about effort, she's put in a lot. He says that not all effort is equal. She has to be willing to die for it, quite literally. She thinks about it. Then he says it's a little weird for him, someone who revives when he dies, to say that. He tells her to be careful on her way back and do as she'd like with those guys. As he walks away, he turns the corner, asking if she can even leave by herself, and Sung Ah says that she can't. He says normally people would ask for help in these cases, so he says that he would like to help her, but he can't leave right now as he came here to clear the whole dungeon. She says in that case, would it be okay if she accompanied him? He's surprised, asking if it's because of what he said earlier about dying, and to forget it, it was just a figure of speech. She says it's not because of that. She knows her place very well. She'll follow him as silently as she possibly can and mine mana stones, and she will not be a nuisance to him. Of course, all of the stones will be his. He tells her it's going to be dangerous, but she says she can protect herself. He thinks about it and says sure, just to follow him. As they make their way forward, they see a whole group of monsters dead on the floor as Yun has just finished murdering them. She says he did well and that she'll do her job now. She pulls out her knife, walking over to their corpses, cutting them open, pulling out the mana stones. He says it looks like she is skilled enough to protect herself, just like she said, wondering if she has a stealth skill because when combat started, she fell back and occasionally supported with her bow, and she never got in his way. She even takes care of the mana stones he normally leaves behind because he can't be bothered, and that this is going to make his life a lot easier. He asks her what she wants to do now, saying with the energy he's feeling, the boss room is up ahead and it could be really dangerous. She tells him she's already resolved herself and she'll follow him until the end. But then a message tells him that the dungeon's main core has been destroyed, so the portal to the outside has been opened. They're both surprised, and he wonders if someone beat him to it. But he says there's no way because he still senses the boss's energy, and it's hella ominous from down the corridor. He tells her that this is a dungeon break. This is Korea's very first D-ranked dungeon break. On the news, they are covering it, saying that in a Seoul suburb, 10 dungeons open at once and a monster wave has occurred. It is the February 8th dungeon incident and is the third occurrence nationally. However, unlike the previous two incidents, this wave was artificially created by terrorists, according to professional analysis. A man runs in, calling out to the association president, and we see the man responding. It is none other than Choi Dong-woo. We have heard him mentioned before, but we are now formally introduced. He says he's finished his preparations, and the man tells him that according to the report that just came in, there is a D-ranked dungeon amongst the ones that broke. Dong-woo asks for the location. He is told that it is the Research Institute. Dong-woo says of all places, it had to be that one, and it wasn't cleared because it's tricky, that's going to bite him in the ass. He asks if there are any major guilds available, and the man tells him that there's only the Hangul Guild, but their main members are all on a business trip. Dong-woo says to gather 50 elite members immediately, and they'll go to Suwon. The rest will go to other dungeons depending on their teams. Suwon is where the institute is. At the Dongan Guild, Seon asks how the situation is, and Hyun tells her that Dong-woo will be going himself to the Research Institute, moving with his elite members. She says that at that rate, they're going to be late, asking if there are any guilds that can defend until then. Hyun says that ignoring the Hangul Guild, only smaller ones are available. However, there is one talent that is eliminating monsters quickly. She asks more about him, and he says that he has a big sword, the dude is jacked, and his face is hella mean. She immediately recognizes who he's talking about and starts smiling, saying that there won't be any problems over there then. As we see, he is now in the street slaughtering his own kind. R.I.P. the friendly fire. Everybody else is just surprised that he's killed that many on his own, wondering if this is really the level that they should be at. One of the men says they survived thanks to him, thanking him and asking how to repay him. He says, "Here," which confuses the guy, asking what he means. Yun glares at him, saying to get the fuck out of here if he doesn't want to die, to run quickly. He asks what he means as the area starts to distort. Yun says this is why, it's because the crack has not closed yet, which means that the boss monster is still there. Yun tells them that the boss still isn't here, and if they stay they're going to die a dog's death. They're surprised, but one man decides that he does not think the same. He walks forward, telling Yun to wait a minute. Regardless of how they look, they are all talented, and even if it's just a little, they can help. Yun calls out to the dude who asked him what he wants, and Yun asks how many chimeras he's killed so far. The guy hesitates, and Yun gets right into his face, asking if he's ever even killed one. Saying even if they are all here, they'll just be a nuisance, and if they understand, then they should go help the civilians evacuate. The dude starts to freeze up, trying to explain himself, while everybody else in the back wonders what Yun's deal is, saying that even if he's strong, he's acting like an asshole. One of the guys glances over, seeing that Yun's face is filled with rage, and he laughs nervously, saying they should probably do what he says. They all leave, which is what Yun wanted. He then sighs, glad that they did it, but Sung-ah stands there calling out to him. She doesn't really know what to say, so she looks off to the side nervously. He says that surely she can handle it, and he's talking about sniping. She asks what he means, and he says that he's going to be counting on her to cover him, and she should find a place to hide on her own, asking if she can do that. She's surprised that he's giving her the chance, but says yes. Back at the rift, something steps out, but it's not alone, as there are multiple of them. They're all chimera hybrids, and we see there are 3 monsters. Yun asks what the hell this is, and jokes if it's the 4 heavenly kings, but realizes there are only 3, so changes it to that. Instinctively, he can tell that each one of them is on par with the ogre he fought earlier, and with the boss behind them, this is definitely not going to be an easy task. As it starts to make its way out, its jaw rattles as it's laughing. It floats up into the sky above the other 3 monsters. The rift then slowly starts to close, and the Lich says that these buildings sure are strange. Yun is caught off guard that a monster spoke, and the Lich looks down at him, asking if surely he's not intending to stand in his way solo. Yun says of course he is as he reaches into his inventory, pulling out his giant-ass hammer. He slams it forward, turning one of the monster's corpses into a pile of meat chunks. He says he's going to smash the Lich's head and turn it into a puzzle. The Lich gets a little annoyed, calling him arrogant, saying that looking at his body, he seems quite usable. Yun says enough with the yapping, asking if they can just have a duel between themselves as leaders, and to set the minions aside and fight him man to man. The Lich doesn't even hesitate, saying nah. Yun spits in his hand, saying that he wasn't expecting anything anyways. He then starts death gripping the hammer, and raises it up, telling the Lich that he's coming in as he starts running forward towards the monsters. They retaliate by charging in, as a full-on brawl is about to begin. Yun takes in a deep breath, and then yells, activating his lion's roar, which stuns every single one of the 3 heavenly kings, stopping them in their tracks. Yun then leaps into the air, saying for now, he's just going to kill them. But in particular, he's going to start with this turtle thing as he smacks it in the head. He raises the hammer, just beating the absolute piss out of this thing over and over, while the Lich stands there watching. But it seems the Lich is finding the situation amusing, as it can't feel any mana from Yun, asking if this is just raw strength. Then the Lich thinks about it, saying it would be a waste to kill him. It slowly raises its hand up, saying that it plans to keep him alive and make him a slave. Back to the turtle thing, we see Yun give it one more heavy hit. Though its head was thought to have exploded, it turns out only its helmet gets cracked and explodes off, revealing the same goblin face we saw earlier. As it falls to the floor backwards, Yun lands back on his feet. His legs are shaking as he mutters that this thing is way too damn heavy. Back to the Lich, the reason it raised its hand was to activate mind control as it shoots out a red aura directly toward Yun. For Yun, we see it hit him, and his mind starts to get hella clouded, at least based on his pupils. The Lich thinks that its mind control has completely worked already. As the aura completely envelops him, the Lich declares that Yun is now fully within its grasp. As Yun slowly lowers his hammer, the Lich says that it welcomes him, glad that he became its slave, and tells him to bow down and prove his loyalty. Yun then opens his mouth and slowly raises his hand, which surprises the lich. It's none other than Yun giving it the bird, saying hell no, and that he was just messing with it. Of course, he has the ring that resists mind control. The lich starts to try to make sense of the situation, spotting the ring, saying that Yun must have defended himself with an item. What a shame, as it had intended to keep him intact. The Tiger Man then charges forward with a punch. It's too fast for Yun to dodge, so instead he uses his Antria Integument skill to harden his face, tanking the hit, but gets sent flying into a nearby store, causing it to explode. The other monster, along with the tiger, starts making their way toward the store. Suddenly, an arrow flies in from behind, hitting the tiger in the head. The lich is surprised that Yun has a companion, but obviously, it's not at a level it needs to be concerned about, as the Tiger Man just brushes the arrow off. Yun calls out to Sung Ah, saying that was some great timing. When the lich looks back down, Yun is already in a crouching stance. He dashes off with his hammer in hand, tightening his grip as he comes in with a heavy swing to the tiger, saying that's the perfect place to hammer in a nail, and he's talking about the arrow. He does exactly that, lodging it completely through the tiger's skull. It's unclear if it went out the other side, but the tiger dies, falling over. Now that we can see a better view, the hammer is absolutely massive. The last monster, the snake dude, whips its tail forward. When Yun turns, the tail stabs him directly through the chest. Gritting his teeth, he drops the hammer but grabs the tail, surprising the snake. He turns, lifting it into the air, and judo throws it straight into the concrete. While the snake is reeling from the attack, Yun reaches into his inventory, pulling out his sword, and charges directly at it, not giving it time to react. When the snake turns, all it sees is Yun with his sword raised, grinning at it. He absolutely rips the thing to shreds. After a while, the sound of his blade stabbing stops, and we see it dripping blood. The lich seems impressed as Yun stands over the snake man's remains, clearly having taken out all of his frustration on it. Wiping some blood from his face, Yun mutters that it looks like there's only one left. Then he turns back to the lich, calling it Baldy. The lich stares down at Yun, telling him that he's bluffing, asking how somebody with no remaining mana plans on going up against him. Yun locks in, saying that it looks like it actually noticed. For sure, he doesn't have enough mana right now, and his regeneration is also reaching its limit. More than anything, he doesn't have the means to strike it down while it's floating. He doesn't even have the strength to jump or throw his weapon. If he could use his strength, it would be a different story, but we see his legs are shaking. He then feels his heart pulsating as if something had its hands on it. Blood starts to pour down his nose, and his head starts to spin as he starts coughing up actual chunks of blood. His legs give out as he slips and falls to the floor, turning back to look up at the lich, asking what the hell it did. The lich says that it has started to take effect, asking if he thought the stab earlier was just a simple melee attack. Since he was planning to use that to eat away at his insides, there was no reason to not use poison. He tells Yun that he no longer has any chance of victory, and he'll give him the antidote if he surrenders and becomes his slave. Yun starts to laugh and say, nah, and he already told it that he's going to break its skull and make a puzzle with it. His eyes start to light up with his red aura, and he says that he's going to use the remaining mana he has to cure the poison and gamble it all on his last resort. Of course, he's talking about his sword's ability, which is Berserker, and increases his strength and vitality by 1.5 times for 5 minutes. But he has severe after effects. He starts to release even more aura than he had when he was in peak condition, and tells the lich to get its ass down here, as even if he has to go to the afterlife, he'll take responsibility and at least bring it with him. But then we hear Dongwu telling him that he's done enough. When Yun turns, he sees him walking towards him. He says he doesn't know who he is, but he's done something incredible, and that he, the talented association president, will take care of it from here. Yun recognizes him as the tutorial graduate and president of the association. Dongwu tells him that he has serious injuries and to rest for a bit. Yun tells him to wait as he can still fight, but of course that's not the truth, as he immediately feels hella fatigue set in and drops to his knees. He's a little annoyed, saying that he almost had it, and falls down to the ground, sighing, saying that he also appeared in a uselessly cool way. It jumps to a hospital as Yun opens his eyes. He sees Ahun sitting there beside him. Ahun asks him if he's fully awake. He says he can't believe he sees her shitty face as soon as he wakes up, and she claps back, saying that she can't believe he's saying shitty words as soon as he opens his eyes. This was the actual dialogue. She asks why he didn't just die, as the hospital fees are expensive. He asks why she's saying that to her brother, and then asks about the dungeon break, asking what happened. She says she doesn't know the details, but she heard it went well, and that she was super surprised as she received a call about his hospitalization and came in only to find Dong-woo, which is someone she recognized from TV. Yun also thinks about it, and recalls the card he got from Sun-woo before saying that he doesn't feel like he owes him this time. Hyun tells him not to push himself, as she's worried about his unique ability, because who's to say that the next death won't just be permanent. He says that she just had to say that and it feels like she's jinxing it, asking if she thinks that he dies because he wants to, and every time he does his level gets cut down and it feels like shit. He then notices something, as she looks hella worried about him. He realizes that she's probably right, and scratches his head telling her that he'll try. It jumps back to the Talented Association, specifically Dong-woo's room, and we hear Sun-woo asks if he knows Yun. Dong-woo says no, and recalls that he saw Sun-woo's name on the report mentioning him. Sun-woo asks why he personally evacuated him and even paid for his hospital fees. Dong-woo laughs, saying that he witnessed the birth of a new hero. So when else will he get the honor of helping him out if not now? As he has some dumb memory of Yun teary-eyed yelling saying he's going to defeat the Lich. This is not what happened. Sun-woo asks him how it went in the end, and Dong-woo says that the Lich ran away. Back at the hospital, we see a doctor saying that according to the results there are no issues, and that a Talented's recovery rate sure is quite something. As he is now being discharged, Yun says he told her yesterday that he was free to find a go, that he talks too much, and that the association president paid for the fees anyways. He asks her if she knows how much it costs for him to take a break, and we hear a nurse saying that she told somebody before there was no patient named Yun. When he looks over, we see a guy talking to the receptionist. Yun tells his sister to go first, and the dude double checks that he's not here. The lady says if he's already been discharged, they can't inquire about where he is. The guy sighs, wondering if he was late. Yun asks who he is. When the guy turns, he sees him and asks him if he's Yun. Yun says yes, and he heard his name. The guy says one moment as he reaches into his coat, pulling out a card showing that he is from the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, and his name is Shen Tijil. Yun reads his card, asking about the special, talented management team, asking why the government's even looking for him. A bit later, we see a steak on a grill. Yun asks if he's really okay with this, saying that it's pretty expensive. Tijil says of course, and there's no issue with it. Yun says he was wondering where his taxes went, and he guesses this is how he gets his return. Then he gets serious, asking the dude what he wants and if he wants him to work for the government. Tijil says of course, but they won't force him, and he's just making an offer. Yun asks if that means he'd be a civil servant, asking what is so good about that in the first place. Tijil says to start with, he won't be a regular civil servant, and that their organization is dedicated to preparing for the rapidly changing future, as that is what his team is. The government has already judged that it is not possible to control the talented, as the number of them increases every day, it feels like. But of course, it's impossible to control them with force, and they didn't want to burn any bridges with them. Because of that, the government has decided to build a relationship based on helping one another out, by supporting them as much as possible. Yun says he sees, but is really just judging this dude for how shittily he's cooking the meat. Yun asks what's in it for him. Tijil replies, saying that the biggest benefit will be, of course, money. They will offer him enough money that he won't ever have trouble doing whatever he wants. If there is ever an issue with his personal safety, they will forever take care of his family, and also give him the person of merit level treatment. Yun says the conditions seem good, which means that he'd have a lot of work to do. Tijil says he won't deny that, however, they also won't ask for anything unfair of him. He can keep his current lifestyle and only move when they ask for his help. Yun thinks about it, saying it's not that bad. Tijil then informs him that both Dong-woo and Seon are already cooperating with them. He asks if that means he could have a side gig, and decides why the hell not. Back to the research institute's vicinity, Yun's walking back to get his car, saying he completely forgot it here, and doesn't even know if it's going to be okay after the chaos. He then hears someone call out to him, and when he looks up it's none other than Sung-ah. He butchers her name, calling her Sohee. She corrects him, and he says my bad. She hands him a bag, telling him to take this, as we see it's full of the gems from when she was helping him. She says she's late giving this to him, and she was going to do it earlier, but he got carried off after he fainted. He says there's no way, she didn't know he would come back here, yet she still waited here for him to return. She says of course, and he can't believe she's so honest. He says she could have just taken it, but she tells him she can't break a promise with her benefactor. He waves, saying he won't refuse them, thanking her for her consideration. He asks her where the hell his car is. She then calls out to him once more, and when he turns, she hits a very deep bow, asking if he would please take her as an apprentice. Bro is completely confused. It then jumps that night out to the countryside, as we see a dungeon, specifically an F rank dungeon, called Gorka Village. We hear the Lich, saying he didn't think mere humans would corner him to this extent. We hear a familiar voice, saying this must have been where he was hiding. It's none other than Minjin as he walks forward, saying that the title of D rank dungeon would cry if it saw him, if it could. We learn that the Lich's name is Diance. Diance asks who he is, and Minjin says not to be wary, he's not his enemy, and not to mention he is the one who liberated him. Asking Diance what he thinks about this, and if he would like to join hands with him or not. It jumps back to Yusong's estate as we see Sung-ah introducing herself, telling him to take care of her. Bro is also just as confused as he is staring at her. He says that he thought that Yun had no friends, so he would definitely not be able to find a guild member. Yun gets angry asking what he means and why he would not have friends, and he has at least 2. Then he thinks about it, wondering if he even has a single one. He quickly changes the conversation, saying that he won the bet and that he's going to pay for the meal like he promised. Yusong sighs, saying he pays anyways, and says that he'll agree that he lost, but she has to pass the test if she's going to join the guild. And surely it's fine if they enter a dungeon. She agrees, saying that there's no issue with that. Yun can tell he just wants to go on a hunt. They head to a D rank dungeon called the Harpy's Cliff. And of course that's what's inside, as we see a harpy screeching while flying through the air, looking down at Yun and them as there are harpy corpses below them. Sung-ah raises her bow, releasing it as the arrow flies through the air, hitting it straight in the head. It falls down dead on the floor. Yusong says damn, it certainly is nice to have a long-range damage dealer, and it feels like a real party now. He asks Yusong if she passed the test or not. Yusong asks what he's talking about. Yun says that he mentioned that he wanted to do a test or something. He says that he low-key forgot about it. Yun says he knew it was only because he wanted to hunt. Sung-ah then draws out her blade and walks over to the corpses, saying that she'll collect the mana stones. Yun says he told her that she doesn't have to do it and it's just annoying work. She tells him it's okay and that she's doing it because she likes it. Yusong says that he's on her side and they're worth something, so he shouldn't just waste them. Yun asks why he wouldn't have money, and it's much better to just take the course. Asking Yusong if he collects mana stones. He says hell no, because he's rich. Love the banter. Yun then notices something, asking Yusong if he feels that too. Yusong asks what he means and then starts to think about it. And after a bit he does start to feel it. They both start to lock in and she wonders what they are doing. She sees Yun with his eyes closed. He then instantly opens them, rearing his fist back, punching forward, hitting something in the air. Blood starts to fly and the stealth comes undone as it's some dude in a robe who falls over on the floor. Dude starts foaming up the mouth, he might have just killed this guy. Yun asks what this is and Yusong laughs, saying that's some high quality stealth. He has good senses, as he didn't feel anything until the dude got close, and seeing how he didn't have any killing intent. It doesn't seem like he was trying to harm them. Yun says that doesn't mean he came here to do good deeds and he smells something fishy. Yusong says it's possible that it's just an awaken that was passing by and that this is just pure violence. Yun tells him that his bad manners to approach someone in stealth while in a dungeon anyways, and that he deserved what he got. But that he has something in mind. It jumps back to him signing the contract with Tejal, who says that with this it is now established and they look forward to his work. Yun says sure and tell him if there's anything he needs to do. Tejal says that he's sorry for asking, but there is something he would like to tell him beforehand, asking if he knows about the recent dungeon terrorism incidents. Yun says something about how people are creating dungeon breaks. Tejal says yes, and they have caught the tail of the organization responsible and are tracking the head at the moment. And soon there will be plans for a massive attack led by the government and that they will need his help. The dude wakes up to getting some gamer girl bath water poured on him and he wonders what's going on. Yun asks if he's finally awake and the dude wonders why he's tied up and he starts yelling, asking who they are and what they are doing. The dude then starts to smell what was poured on him and asks what the hell this is. Yun apologizes, saying that they were going to use water but they didn't have enough to drink, so they instead just used the piss that was on the harpy's bladder. My gamer girl bath water joke turned out to be true. The guy calls him crazy, asking why he'd pour monster's piss on somebody, and starts vomiting in front of them. Yun says it's now time for him to answer, and crouches down, getting to his eye level, saying surely it's him, and that he is the dungeon terrorist. The dude starts to laugh, saying that terrorists are what people are calling it, but they don't know anything about how noble the goal is they are pursuing. Yun says noble or not, he doesn't actually care, and he just wants him to tell him what he knows, and he'll release him. The dude asks if he really thinks he'll talk if he says that, and he can torture or threaten him as much as he wants, as no one will be able to hinder their cause. Sometime later, It jumps to the end of the day, and the dude's crying, with his face all swollen, saying he'll tell him, begging to be let go. Yun says this dude lacks desperation, and he wants to break 3 or 4 more teeth. He starts pulling them out with his hands, and the guy screams. Later, outside of the dungeon, we hear Tejal asking Yun if he really caught a terrorist. Yun says yes, while holding on to the dude, who was begging for his life, and asks that they save him from this monster. Tejal points at him, asking why his face looked like that though. Yun says he has no idea, and that he thinks the harpies beat him up. Tejal's men start dragging him away, and he says they'll take it from here, thanking him for his cooperation. Yusong waves at him, saying they meet again. The Tejal greets Yusong. Yun asks if they know each other, and he says they scouted him as well, although he refused immediately. Yusong says it seemed boring to be part of the government. Yun finds it surprising that he's bad at thinking things through, and Tejal then says he wants to discuss the details tomorrow. And it's late, plus there are outsiders present. The next day, at the office building for the management team, Tejal puts down some coffee, and tells him that the terrorist's name is Jian Yongshik. His unique ability is stealth, and he seems to have an important role within the organization. Yun says okay, but of course he's already heard all of this. Tejal tells him that, thanks to him though, they have gotten information on their headquarters, and he said before they were planning on leading a massive attack 2 weeks from now. Yun asks what kind of preparation they need 2 weeks for, asking why they don't ransack it. Tejal says for the first time in the entire world, a C-rank dungeon was cleared by China, saying surely he heard the news. Yun says he thinks he saw it mentioned on the news at least. Tejal continues saying the conversation will be quick then. The information hasn't been revealed to the media, but a total of 1,200 people participated in the clear, and half of them lost their lives. Yun's surprised, as Tejal says he must understand as someone who's gone into a D-rank dungeon on his own, the danger level of dungeons has been increasing exponentially. Yun says that's certainly true, even if the rank only goes up by 1, you need several times as many members, though he wouldn't really know since he always goes alone. Tejal tells him that China's strategy utilized a human wave attack, however that was why they failed. They had incredible numbers, but their average stats were all ass. That's why he wants to select a small number of elite members and clear the C-rank dungeon that appeared in Gangnam, called Benendi's Fortress. Yun's surprised, asking if there's even a need to clear it, since China already has the title first to clear a C rank, and he can stop the dungeon from opening if they regularly break the core. Wondering what the point of clearing it is, Tejal says that he's surprisingly keen. Yun asks what he means by surprisingly, wondering how he's seen by him. Tejal takes a sip of his coffee and puts it down, saying that the problem is they have never managed to clear the normal core, and at this rate it's going to open in less than 2 weeks. Damage monsters that can kill hundreds of talented will be released into the middle of Seoul, an area full of civilians. Yun realizes that's bad, and Tejal tells him that of course they will be sure to properly prepare for that eventually, but considering the location and danger level, the expert opinion is that the damage will be worse than expected from a single dungeon break. Yun says that it seems like they're in the middle of a crisis, and if he's stopping with him in these busy times, surely he's asking for him to participate. Tejal says yes, but because of a law he doesn't understand, it's impossible to participate in the raid alone, which is why they're asking him if he could create a guild. They're aware that he tends to prefer working alone, however maybe he can endure it this one time for their country and help them. Of course they'll take care of the troublesome procedures and they won't hold back on supporting him. Yun's actually a little caught off guard and sighs, saying that just this once. Of course he was going to make one anyways, but they're spoon feeding him this, so of course he's going to milk it. If you've watched till the end, comment, corn, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.